What is happening, Awesemo baseball fans? Welcome to the first live before lock of the season. It's opening day, one of my favorite days of the year. I'm here with the boss man, Alex Awesemo Baker himself. We're going to dive into a baseball slate. It's 40 degrees. It's raining in the Northeast, and it's opening day. It seems like a perfect day for baseball. What the hell? Alex, how you doing, man?
Doing good, man. I think that opening day is always super exciting, and we got a lot of DFS to do today. Not just
Oh, yeah.
baseball, but it's good to talk some bats here, and hopefully we can get some takedowns today.
Yeah, should be fun. A lot of stuff to go through here. We've got the FanDuel slate locking at 220. So we're going to be covering everything running up to lock there. We're going to do a show right up to that. Then we're going to do 25 minutes extra after that. Just you and me talking about some DFS strategy for baseball. That's going to run into a quick video that's a pre-programmed video. And then you're going to get Greg and Gundacker for the second live before lock, before the DK slate locks at 4, guys. So ton of baseball content coming up. We've got the Masters on TV. Tigers tearing it up. I heard he almost hit a hole in one earlier. Just a crazy day of sports, like you're saying. We've got NBA later on. Ton of stuff going on. Make sure you're liking and subscribing, guys. It helps us out if you hit the little thumbs up down there. We appreciate it. You subscribe, you get the notifications every time we go live, anytime a show hits. Make sure you're at the site checking out all the free tools and content we've got up too. We've got MLB projections, pretty important today. NBA main slate ownership projections and NHL top stacks are free today. And we've also got a podcast giveaway going on. First time I'm hearing about it, but maybe I wasn't paying attention on the other shows. Go to our Awesemo podcast channel and give us a 5-star review with your Twitter handle or your Awesemo username included. We're going to enter you to win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum if you give us a 5-star review there. A little bribery. I guess that's how the system works with those things, but hey, whatever. So, Alex, start us off up at the top. Let's talk about a little bit of baseball. We had the Yankees and the Red Sox canceled for rain with the ugly weather up here. We had the Twins and the Mariners also scrapped because they've got snow because they built an outdoor stadium in Minneapolis, and that's what happens in Minneapolis in April. But what else are you looking at? I know the Mets game was moved back to accommodate the weather. Anything else on your radar, so to speak, as far as weather and everything goes?
Yeah, this first game, Milwaukee at Chicago has some interesting weather considerations. But as far as rainouts, nothing really looking too ominous. I think pretty set on the slate here, so just gonna have to focus on finding the best DFS plays.
Beautiful. I love it. Yeah, nothing seems like it's going to be totally taken off the board on us, and we'll have time to react unless it's that first game. Not going to get a rain out there, but like you said, definitely some interesting weather. Looks like they've got some pretty significant wind blowing out in Chicago today, so could have an impact. Let's dive into that first game. Not on the DK slate, of course, but we're talking FanDuel single pitcher site. And we get the bonus of having Corbin Burns going up against the Chicago Cubbies here. Talk to me a little bit about Burns. We can talk about Kyle Hendricks if you got any interest in him. Let's start off with some of the pitchers here.
Yeah, so I think that I was thinking, okay, it's really cold in Chicago. It's like 45 degrees. I was like, and Corbin Burns, so one of the best pitchers, if not the best in baseball, is pitching. I'm like, the total of this game is going to be like 7. It opened at 11, and I'm like, there's no way this is right. So I bet the under, and it's at 9 now. So don't at me when there's like 15 home runs in this game. But the wind is going to be a big factor here. But like a lot of times in bad weather games is like Coors Field, where that suppresses strikeouts too. That's not going to be the case today. I mean, Corbin Burns, he had a 38% strikeout rate last year. So I think that upside is huge, but the blow up potential is also higher than we're used to with an ace pitcher like that.
And you concerned at all with it being opening day? Any concerns around pitch count, innings limit, anything like that with a pitcher like Burns, where you're going to, one of the apex starters, like you said, in the league? Any worries that they're just, going to wind him up a little bit slowly going into the season? Or you're just kind of firing away?
Yeah, I think I'm worried about pitch count for certain guys. Corbin Burns, he was pretty healthy last year, so I don't see a huge reason to be concerned. Okay, so it looks like he exceeded 80 pitches in a spring training game, so that's a good sign. I don't know if he's the type to go out and throw 115 pitches or something anyway. We have him projected for 89, and he still looks like a great option because his strikeouts are so good.
Yeah, just a dominant pitcher all last season. And to your point, yeah, 167 in 28, 167 innings in 28 starts last year. Not a guy who needs to pitch 9 innings to have a monster fantasy score because of that 35% strikeout rate. So just a dominant force. Any love for Kyle Hendricks on the other side of this one going up against the Brewers lineup here?
Kyle Hendricks is always a guy that he's a little bit frustrating in DFS because he doesn't have a great strikeout rate. Probably a better pitcher than he is a fantasy pitcher because he gets some ground balls. So I would say on FanDuel where you only get one pitcher, he'd probably be towards the bottom with the weather being bad, and also the opportunity cost is very high.
Yeah, absolutely. On the FanDuel slate, he's my second lowest projected pitcher in my personal projections. Looks like we've got him ranked at the bottom of the board on our top pitchers tool. So definitely, I don't think I'm even throwing a single share his way. I just don't see it. And I don't like chasing, even for value, chasing those low strikeout rate guys. 16.7% strikeouts last year is not exactly something to go after. So yeah, even with a good price on him, I am just not touching Kyle Hendricks here. I do think that Kyle Hendricks, though, might make the Brewers stack a little bit interesting. It looks like we've got them pretty highly rated on the top stacks tool. That's a stack that you're chasing on the FanDuel slate? It looks like they're pulling a lot of ownership, so they're at negative leverage. Is it something where you're kind of willing to eat that negative leverage on a stack that good?
Yeah, I mean, this stack looks killer. The team total is high because of the wind, and then the prices are low because this is a April baseball game. So I think that there's really not any reason to shy off of the Brewers bats. But then there's always the ownership considerations. So let me pull up the top stacks. What are you doing with the Brewers today?
Yeah, so I'm sure that there's going to be a good amount of them. I'm still wrestling with my my sorting tool here to figure out exactly what's going to go into the tournament. But they definitely came up a decent amount in my crunch that I ran that I dropped into here. So I'll have a fair amount of the Brewers. Just taking a look at the projected lineup that we've got. You get Colton Wong, Willy Adames, Christian Yelich, Andrew McCutchen off the top. That's a decent little 4-man on its own, but that's drawing a lot of ownership. 3 of those 4 guys are projected at 30% plus ownership. They're super cheap though. So like they make things work pretty well. All 3, the 3 of the 4 top hitters that I just named there are all in the 2000s with Yelich only at 3,300. Yelich struggled last year, 248, 362, 373, only 9 home runs, 9 stolen bases. This is a former NL MVP. We know that Christian Yelich is a better ball player than that. So I'm happy to go to him at that price, but there's just a ton of popularity there. So maybe you offset one of those options with a Rowdy Tellez, a Hunter Renfro. Renfro's a player I like. Ton of power, great contact, 14.4% barrel rate, 44.3% hard hit with Boston last year, 31 home runs. So I like getting some of his power. You get a little ownership discount for him. He's still cheap. Maybe like a Narvaez if you need a catcher, but not really the top of my board on the FanDuel slate. But there are ways to differentiate there, but the top end of that Brewer stack is super duper popular.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, they're incredibly cheap. The weather is good. It does kind of if you do go with the Brewers and then like maybe even go with Corbin Burns, like you're setting yourself up for a pretty chalky stack. So you want to maybe get a little bit less popular stack. If you load up the top stacks tool, Milwaukee has the best chance to be in the top stack and the top value stack. And they're almost twice as owned as any other team. But it's because they're in such a good spot. There's a couple of guys that stand out. Like obviously, guys with big ISO are gonna be once a target in a win game. So I'm looking at this Frank. This is the
Cubbies.
Yeah, the Cubs side.
Swindell.
So Schwindel, like he had a 300 ISO last year. That could be a good guy to pick for a homer in this game. On the Brewers side, not a ton of power bats from last year, but McCutchen, he had a decent ISO. Looks like Yelich's his numbers weren't like, I know he didn't have a good season last year, but 125 ISO is particularly bad. So did you hear about anything about Yelich, like maybe why he might have had a good year last year? Because it seems like that could be a guy that maybe if you're trying to take a stand on ownership, that could be a guy to fade.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting situation. We're talking about, and I didn't have anything where I could put my finger on what exactly happened to him last year. But in just looking at some of the numbers, that dip is ridiculous. That dropped 100 points of ISO from the year before, where he was at 225. And then in the MVP the year before that, he was at 342 ISO. That's bonkers. He hit 44 home runs that year, stole 30 bases. That's an extreme upside for the player that Christian Yelich is. But we're talking about a guy the year before that, 36 homers, 22 steals, year before that, 18 and 16, and consistently a strong ISO. The ISO jumped from 156 to 272 between 17 and 18. So there was a big power uptick in his career, but it was kind of a natural. It was when he hit his age 25, 26, 27 seasons. So to have him dip that much it's concerning, but I don't exactly have a reason. I think he had some lingering issues with injuries and stuff like that, but it wasn't exactly that. So yeah, if you want to make a stand on somebody, I mean, that's an easy player to take out. You're talking about the biggest star in that lineup that you can remove from that lineup and then stack some of these other Brewers, but you are taking away probably still their best bat. A guy that is not maybe getting enough attention is Andrew McCutchen for only 2,500. If he's hitting cleanup, still excellent contact numbers, excellent power numbers from McCutchen, 222 ISO last season. So a solid ISO coming up from Philadelphia, has the opportunity to DH here in Milwaukee. So should do a little bit more with the bat this season. So he might be a guy to, maybe press up some shares. He's at 21%. So it's not like he's sneaky, but maybe you press up some shares of him if you're taking the Yelich shares away.
Nice. I like that. Man, I wish I just asked Christian Yelich himself, because at the FanDuel final, we were hanging out in Arizona, like basketball, and Rinpack Ryan, he was like, dude, that's Christian Yelich.
Oh, no
and
way.
then like apparently Ryan actually knows one of Christian Yelich's homies. So he was like talking to the group that he was part of. So that was kind of cool. Shout out to Rinpack.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, but yeah, it's like his ISO number is like the lowest on the team last year, which is bizarre. But this is an interesting spot because the weather is so good, but the talent in this Brewers stack doesn't seem to quite live up to that. So maybe there's a spot where you could take some random flyers on like Omar Narvaez, 14% ISO, but it's FanDuel, so you don't get like, he'll probably be pretty low on because he's a catcher.
Yeah.
But you don't need a catcher, so it kind of
you don't have to go to the position, but
Yeah.
if you are playing, if you're bound and determined to play somebody for cheap and low ownership, he's probably going to be in an appropriate lineup spot that you could include him in a stack and not be offsetting your correlation by too much or anything like that. So I do think that he's in play. Anything from the Cubs side? You mentioned Schwindel, his monster year last season, and that was in only 259 plate appearances too. He had 14 homers in that tiny sample. He was a monster last year. I really like Ian Happ's bat, but I don't love the idea of going to these guys against Corbin Burns, particularly, he's going to be highly owned and there's some opportunity to attack leverage, but I just think this lineup is so bad and he is so good that I think we're doing our lineup pool a disservice if we're really trying to attack him with Cub stacks.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about this one is the ownership projections on all the Cubs are low, around 1%.
Yeah, and you're attacking a 21% owned pitcher too.
Yeah, it's like if they can get past Burns and he just has a rough couple innings, then they could be in the best spot in the slate with the weather. Someone that's really popping in the numbers is Patrick Wisdom, a guy that I don't remember being that good, but last year he had this 290 ISO. He hit 28 home runs. The conditions today are excellent for home run hitting. And he's batting 8th, so I don't think he's gonna like really get any ownership. Is that too far off the board, or is that an interesting GPP dart throw?
No, I think that one's definitely interesting. You're talking about a guy, and he hit 28 home runs in 375 plate appearances too. That's an important detail. That's a monster season as well. The ISO is ridiculous, created runs 15% better than average. What I like about Wisdom particularly is the 16.1% barrel rate and the 51.1% hard hit rate. He's a monster strikeout guy. He had a 40.8% strikeout rate. That probably is the worst in the league if memory serves, but he's one of those 3 true outcomes kind of guys. He needs to boost his walk percentage to really get there, but but he's one of those power or strikeout types. So yeah, I don't mind that. I would probably look at it as a one-off maybe, since he is hitting eighth. You're not going to really get a ton of correlation with like the middle lineup bats that are the quality here, like a Wilson Contreras and Ian Happ, but you do get a little bit of it trickle down if you use him at the back end of one of those stacks. But I really like him for 2,300 as a one-off. I think he's a little bit sneaky, totally low ownership, 1% ownership. So you can get away with that for sure.
Nice.
We
Yeah, I
have
think
spent
that
go ahead.
with the one-offs, you got to have some good home run upsides. So that'd be the type of guy you want to target.
And talk about that real quick. We'll get into some of the strategy questions, but just talk about that for a sec, just in terms of how you decide on those one-offs. Because typically I don't like to use a guy who's going to be the most popular player and just has the highest projection on the board as my one-off, because I'm just kind of following the crowd. So I like to get a little different, and I like to go homer hunting. Is that kind of how you treat one-offs as well?
Yeah, I mean, like the idea behind the stack is if the whole team does well, like you're getting a lot of plate appearances for your guy, which is going to really increase their projection. In a one-off, you're not really leveraging that correlation. So you need to, like Patrick Wisdom might get 3 or 4 plate appearances, 4 if you're lucky, and then he's got to do something big in those. So like a home run's really the easy route to that. So I think that for one-offs, you definitely want to target the power hitters. But everyone in the MLB has good power. Like Patrick Wisdom's exceptional. He's like twice the league average. But if you just pick a random player, there's only a few in the league that can't homer.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of those guys don't hit anymore because they're pitchers. And we've got the universal DH this season, which is another big boon to some of these national clubs. You know, you're going to get that extra hitter. I know a lot of people were kind of panicked about National League ERAs going up and all of that. We're not really concerned about that, but we do love the idea of getting the extra hitter here in these National League lineups. Just makes them play a little bit better. And if it seems like I'm stalling for time, I am, because I'm trying to paste this list of players into my model here, and it's not cooperating. There we go. All right. So, guys, I forgot to mention off the top that we're brought to you by Prize Picks today, our big sponsor, one of our great partners. It kills me because I live in New Jersey and we can't play Prize Picks in Jersey yet. We have people just absolutely destroying things on that site right now. There is so much money to be made on Prize Picks. We've got free projections up on the site. You can jump in there for NBA. I'm sure we're going to have them for baseball and everything. So get in there, check it out. We'll talk a little bit more Prize Picks in a couple minutes and go through the promo read, but we got to hit the gas a little bit. We spend a lot of time on the one game that's on FanDuel and not on DK. So we'll just we'll accelerate a little bit through these next ones. We've got next on our list, but not on the schedule because it got moved back for weather reasons. It'll be a night game now, but we've got the Mets going up against the Nationals. Mets lineup taking on Patrick Corbin. I wrote up the Mets as my featured stack for today. They're projecting pretty strongly here for me. And I think it's just an interesting lineup. They're, pushing $300 million team payroll, and they're going up against Pat Corbin, who had kind of a clunker of a season, 4.29 xFIP, 1.47 whip, way too many guys on base last year. Didn't really strike many guys out, 19% strikeouts. Are you rostering any Patrick Corbin, and are you chasing the Mets stack here like me? Is that a priority stack for you today?
So I think with this game, the weather is only 50 degrees, but the humidity is super high. So pretty average conditions. The pitchers with McGill and Corbin, not anything to be too excited about. I guess Corbin, let's see, last year he had a 5.5 xFIP, which is pretty miserable. And then Tyler McGill, he was pretty solid last year, about league average. So this would be a decent one for bats. As far as pitchers, like not as worried about how good they are, but just the strikeout rate. That would definitely lead me more to McGill, who had a 26% K rate last year, compared to Corbin at 18%. But I would say more of a GPP flyer.
Yeah, McGill came out and had a nice little season last year. Kind of unexpected, honestly. It wasn't he wasn't a pitcher that was really on my radar at all, but he got there. He was cheap on a lot of DFS situations. 6,800 going up against what's, it's interesting. This Nationals lineup, they're okay they're very good at the top, and then they tail off really quickly. So it'll be interesting to see how McGill does against this team. I'm getting monster home run numbers for Juan Soto and Nelson Cruz, and also a pretty good one on Josh Bell in the middle of that lineup, though. They were the leading team on my power index that goes in my my tournament strategy article. So I don't know that I'm chasing any shares of McGill on this slate. He doesn't project all that well because of that for me on this slate. I'll have a couple but I don't think I'm going to have any Pat Corbin. But on the stack side of things, I am chasing the Mets stack, like I said, and I think I'm going to have some Washington stacks too at the top ends, as the Cesar Hernandez, Juan Soto, Nelson Cruz, Josh Bell. And I'll throw in Keibert Ruiz if you need a catcher on the DK slate. And Lane Thomas is kind of interesting. Decent hard hit rate for Lane Thomas last year. Sneaky little play down toward the middle of the lineup, but it really trails off for the Nats. Are you getting to either of the stacks here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the stacks, the Mets stack is one of the most popular today and also one of the highest in the top stacks tools. So on DraftKings, where you don't have that first game, particularly high owned at 18.9%, and that's normalized to 100%. So there's 6 games on the slate, and okay, so it's about 1/6 of the ownership, so twice the ownership of average team. So we really need something good to be going for it. The Mets stack, they got some decent players. I mean, Lindor, Alonso, Escobar. Like, there's some decent options. So I think it's a pretty solid stack. And then on the Washington side, it really falls off after the first 4 guys. So I don't know what to do with that one. What are you thinking?
Yeah, that's really where I'm focused, is on the top end of that batting order. Like I was saying, I do like the idea of bolting Cesar Hernandez on above Juan Soto, Nelson Cruz, and Josh Bell. Hernandez, he had a weird season last year. He's been a pretty capable, like 350-ish, 360, 370 on base guy throughout most of his career, 20 stolen bases, leadoff hitter type. Last year, he came out, hit 21 home runs, had a 308 on base percentage, of 154 ISO, career high in home runs. He was kind of selling out for power with Cleveland last year. And now that he's back in, now that he's in DC and back at the top of a lineup, it seems like he's going to go back to that decent, respectable on base guy. I don't think the steals will be there, but I think he's going to score a lot of runs atop that lineup, and I like him ahead of the power there. On the Mets side, I do like getting to Starlin Marte at the top of the lineup. He'll either be hitting first or second. Terrific on base guy, 47 stolen bases last year. A nice piece to bolt into a stack with the guys that you mentioned, Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor. I could get to some James McCann if you need a catcher, kinda, but I could definitely get to some Marcana, some JD Davis, some Eduardo Escobar. So up and down, that Met stack looks pretty good. I don't love Jeff McNeil. He's got a good hit tool, but he struggled with it last year, and a lot of his career has been based on BABIP. He's had a 360, 370 BABIP for most of his career. It dropped to 280 last year, and it cratered all his other numbers. So I don't love McNeil, but the rest of that Mets lineup I'm interested in.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's jump to the next game here. We'll run through the old. Chris, our pal Chris here says a super chat came through. So let me see what that is. Andrew Kang sent us a $5 super chat saying, Alex, Larry Mees, let's go. I love it. All right. So thanks for the super chat, Andrew.
I sent out a tweet about this guy, Larry Mize, and yeah. I actually don't know, because he's like an older guy that won the Masters like a long time ago, and he's in the field every year. 63 years old. So I was just joking. That was definitely not financial advice on that tweet. Hopefully no one bet that for him to win the tournament.
I do love the old guys who get that invite. You know, that's a lifelong invite back for the former champs and everything. And it's great to see that, you know, them come out here. And you do get those guys that are frisky every couple of years, where there's, you know, the old guy comes out first 2 days, he has the frisky tournament, but typically fall off with all the walking and all the effort at Augusta. But it's always fun to see. So let's jump into the Guardians, the Cleveland Guardians this year. I'm going to have a little jar on my desk, I think, to put $1 into every time I use their old name through the season. But they're the Guardians. They've got a ace on the hill in Shane Bieber, dominant ace type pitcher, drawing a lot of ownership on the DK slate, decent amount of ownership on FanDuel, one of our top rated pitchers, going up against an improving but still not great KC lineup here. Zach Greinke on the bump for the Royals. Are you interested in either one of these pitchers?
Bieber is obviously interesting. Like he's been like one of the best pitchers in baseball. Last year, he only played about half the season with a shoulder strain, so that really short circuited a good season, because he had a 34% strikeout rate, 3.1 xFIP. Matchup versus Kansas City is very solid from a talent standpoint. They don't strike out a ton though, so it's probably neutral for fantasy. The big question with Bieber is the pitch count. Now, he went 3 1/3 inning in his last start in spring training 5 days ago. He faced 15 batters, so that was a little bit abbreviated, and he only pitched 100 pitches in 2 spring training starts. So I'm thinking like the upside for pitches is probably like something starting with 8, but that's enough given the matchup and the strikeouts to make him pay off his salary and be the best pitcher on the slate. Are you a little bit worried about the pitch count?
It's a little bit concerning. It's in the back of my mind, but I mean, at 8,300 on the DK slate, it's not like he's super expensive. So I think it's kind of baked in there that you're getting a little bit of a discount on Shane Bieber's talent. So maybe if he doesn't go the full, let's call it 7 innings that he might mid-season against this team, I think there's enough there. And I think, his dominance in terms of the strikeout is plenty that I want to go after him on this slate, and I'll have some. I would probably come in under the field a little bit on the FanDuel slate just because I do like to spread pitching around. There's a few guys that I like in terms of getting to some differentiated starters here, but I definitely think he's got a lot of value. The strikeout rates on KC are interesting, though. You do have a lot of guys that are, reasonably good. 18% for Benintendi, 15.5 for Carlos Santana last year, 13.1 for Nicky Lopez, 14.3 for Whit Merrifield. These guys are good at limiting the strikeouts. There are a few targets like Sal Perez and his big bat, Adalberto Mondesi, at a 31% strikeout rate. So there's some guys in there that are targetable. They offset it, though. So it'll be interesting to see how many he racks up. But I think a 6-7 strikeout game is certainly within reach for him here. And then on the stack side of things, are you getting to any Zach Greinke? I'm not.
He had a rough season last year from both a strikeout and a exit perspective. So I think that he's probably one of the bottom of the list. The only thing kind of interesting about Greinke is just that the total in this game is low. It's only going to be 47 degrees.
Yeah.
So the weather conditions are in Greinke's favor. That's about all else in his favor, though.
Yeah, agreed. And even I don't really love the 7,800 price on FanDuel. At 57, I guess you could argue for him as an SP2 on DK. Yeah, that's right, Chris. I had to hit the Adalberto there. On DK at 57 as an SP2. If you wanted to throw him into a couple, I guess it's all right. It's not like it's a world-beating lineup that he's going up against in Cleveland here. They've got a few decent hitters. I think Ahmed Rosario is a decent hitter. Jose Ramirez had a monster year last year. I love the power on Franmil Reyes and Bobby Bradley. Outside of those guys, it's not the greatest lineup in the world. But like you said, I mean, Greinke was working at like 87 with his fastball and his changeup last year. There was no difference between the two pitches outside of break. He's washed at this point. So I don't love getting a Greinke. Either one of these lineups in play. I just mentioned a few hitters I like from Cleveland. Not really chasing much on the KC side for me. Everybody looks to be rostering Bobby Witt, the big rookie for KC. Outside of him, nobody's overly highly owned on either slate for Kansas City. Are you getting any of them against Bieber here, or are you kind of leaving them alone?
Yeah, it looks like KC is the bottom stack in our top stacks. So they kind of have a double whammy, like going up against a triple whammy. They're going up against the ace, and the weather's bad. And then they're also the home team. That's kind of an underrated factor in stacking, where you're getting an inning less when your team does well, essentially. Because if you're getting that 8-run plus performance, like there's a low percentage chance they're going to be playing in the 9th inning. So that's something I'm factoring into. I think that Cleveland, not much higher, but about double the chance of being the top stack, a little bit negative leverage. So nothing too exciting. They got some decent hitters, though. So you could take a few shots on Cleveland.
Yep. Yeah, that's kind of how I'm looking at them. So let me jump in here. We'll take care of a little quick business, and then we'll move on to the next few games. Guys, we've got Awesemo MLB, which you probably know since you're here watching an MLB show, but weekly pass $29.95 gets you access to all our premium content, our tools, player projections, ownership projections, top stacks, top pitchers, all those different tools. For $4.95 weekly, you can jump in on our Express Pass. It gives you rankings. So it gives you, we rank everybody based on our projections. We rank everybody based on our ownership projections. So you're getting a letter grade and a value for where those guys stack up against one another. We're celebrating the return of baseball with a promo code for that, for the Express Weekly Pass. For $1, you can get the Express Pass with the promo code FASTBALL, all caps, FASTBALL. Go to the checkout page. The link is down there somewhere in the description. That'll activate the offer for you. That's good through April 11th. So we're running that through the end of the weekend. As I mentioned at the top, guys, we're brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a great site. I mentioned how jealous I am of everybody that gets to play on there because they're just raking in the money with our projections. It's all daily prop-based contests. You don't have to worry about going up against mass entries. You don't have to worry about going up against sharks like Alex. You're picking props. You're picking whether it's an over or under is going to hit on a player prop. We've got a promo code going with them. Promo code Awesemo gives you $100 match on your first deposit. Not too bad there. All you have to do on Prize Picks, you pick those props, you build out a 5-player card. So you're making 5 picks and it can win you up to 10 times your entry fee if you get all 5 of them right. It's pretty awesome. You can go across different sports. So you can pick some baseball, some basketball, combine it all. We've got all the different projections up on the site. If you go to Prize Picks and you use our promo code, you can get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus as well. Awesemo Plus Platinum, excuse me. Sign up with the link below, follow the instructions there, make a deposit at Prize Picks, play a contest, and you're going to get an automated email with a promo code to set up a free month of Platinum. So pretty sweet deal going on there with our pals over at Prize Picks. It's an awesome site. I really encourage everybody to check it out. And with that, Alex, we're going to move on to some more baseball games here. We've got a lot to talk about in the next couple of minutes. So let's hit the gas pedal here. Pirates against the Cardinals. Adam Wainwright is coming up as my number 1 owned pitcher. He projects out great against his Pirates lineup for me. I'm not getting any JT Brubaker. How are you seeing the pitching breakdown on this one?
Yeah, JT Brubaker is not the first name that comes to mind when I'm thinking about picking a fantasy pitcher. But yeah, the Cardinals, they have a team total of 4.7, which is pretty healthy. Brubaker, 24% strikeout rate, so a little bit better than average. Decent potential there. So not completely crossing him off. Wainwright is kind of surprisingly popping today, like the 26% owned on DraftKings, 10% on FanDuel. He had a nice season last year with a 3.5 xFIP, 22% strikeout rate, which was pretty solid numbers because a few years back he wasn't very good at all. So he's interesting. And Pittsburgh just is a totally rebuilding team that has a lot of weak spots in the order. So it makes sense why you could go to Wainwright, but what do you think?
Yeah, I like Wainwright a lot. He's a pitcher that I got to a lot through, his gradual decline, and then he had a very strong bounce back, got through 206 innings last season. I do have some lingering concerns over the course of the entire season about that workload on an elbow that's been rebuilt several times. But a 21% strikeout rate is not exactly dominant. What he does really well, though, is keep guys off base, limit opportunity, keep the ball in the yard. He's just very good at pitching, right? So he might not be the dominant force in terms of racking up a ton of strikeouts against these guys, but I like him to get to the quality start. I like him to get to the win bonus. So I do have a bunch of shares of Waino here. I'm getting to him. I like the price at 8,000. I think that the Pirates are, I agree with you. This is not a good baseball team right now. I do think they're going to be frisky for DFS purposes, though. Brian Hayes is a good hitter. Brian Reynolds is a good hitter. Yoshi Tsutsugo's got power. They've got some names in there, and they've got a kid named O'Neill Cruz or O'Neill Cruz, who's coming up in a few weeks. He is a beast of a shortstop. He's like 6'9" or something like that. Monster 70 grade power. When he gets here, this is going to be a frisky lineup. For right now, they're kind of a doormat. So there's a couple of hitters in there, like the guys I named, that you worry about, but I like going with Wainwright here. Are you throwing any Cardinals stacks at JT Brubaker? They're pricey. They're really expensive on both sites today. Are you getting any cards?
Yeah, sometimes price can be a good reason to take a team because that really drives down the ownership. Yeah, we do see that today a few teams are picking up a lot more ownership than others. St. Louis being at 6%. They are one of the few teams that has a pretty high chance of success that also has good leverage. So I think St. Louis is firmly in play. Like I'd be pretty confident with them in any type of lineup.
Yeah, I really like the top end of that St. Louis lineup. We'll see how it comes out. One of the projection sites had Tommy Edmund leading off. That's where I had him. Another one had him in the 9 hole. Either way, I like bolting Edmund on, but he's crazy high priced on the DK slate. Tommy Edmund is not a $5,800 player. He stole 30 bases last year, but he only got on base at a 308 clip. So he needs to improve his on base. He'll be a much better asset for that team, hitting ahead of Paul Goldschmidt, Tyler O'Neill, and Nolan Arenado, who I absolutely love. Oh, I'm sorry. This is a confirmed lineup. So Edmund hitting ninth. Yeah. So you can use him. You can use Edmund as a wraparound if you want to pay for him. I don't mind Dylan Carlson up there, but I really want to get to the heart of Goldschmidt, O'Neill, Arenado. You can work in Albert Pujols. You can work in the criminally underrated Paul DeJong in terms of the power upside for a shortstop. He struggled with a 197, 284, 390 last year, but the power was still there, 19 home runs. So I like getting to that. Tyler O'Neill was my home run pick for the day. So I really love his bat this season. Anything else from this game? Or are we ready to jump over to the next one? We got a couple more to go through.
Yeah, let's keep it moving here, I guess.
Cool. Cincinnati Reds going up against the Atlanta Braves. One of my go-to starters, but not today, in Tyler Mahle going for the Reds. I'm getting a bad projection on him today. Looking for the Braves to kind of beat him up in my numbers here. Love the Braves lineup. Getting to some shares of Max Fried is a pitcher I like. I think the price is a little high for Max, but I like him going up against what should be a middling Cincinnati lineup. They moved out a bunch of their good hitters this season. They've got some quality left in the lineup in Cincinnati, but I think it's a good spot for Max. I just don't love the price. What are you doing with these two pitchers?
Yeah, so I'm kind of intrigued by Mahle as a contrarian play today. Atlanta coming off that World Series win, like there's probably a lot of enthusiasm about betting them in this game, so that might skew the odds a little bit. Mahle is a pretty good pitcher, 28% K rate last year, a little bit better than average xFIP. And the price is it's high enough to like keep the ownership down a little bit. So like this seems like the quintessential that's baseball spot where like it looks like a team has like all these factors going for them, but you just kind of like in baseball, like nothing's that likely. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Mahle had a pretty solid game here, and that strikeout rate gives him a lot of upside. Fried on the other side, let's see, he a pretty average strikeout pitcher. Price is kind of high, and then the matchup is kind of average as far as strikeouts for Cincinnati. We did get the lineups for this game, so make sure to refresh the projections.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, I think that Cincinnati, their lineup actually, it looks like it's pretty solid from top to bottom. Aside from maybe Nick Senzel. But it seems like that 4-team total is kind of scaring me off here. I'm trying to like think of why that like total is low. It's like the weather is 66 in Atlanta. That seems about average. Max Fried he had a really good season last year, 3.5 xFIP. I guess that could do it.
Yeah, and he's good at keeping guys off base too. He limits the base runner 109 whip last season. And he's also pretty decent at keeping the ball in the yard. A 6.3% barrel rate, 34.3% hard hit is very, very good. So keeps the ball in the yard, 6.1 degree average launch angle too. So difficult to hit home runs off of. Probably keeps the total down a little bit. And then, yeah, let's see what's in that confirmed Reds lineup. So India, Aquino. I do like Aristides Aquino hitting second. A lot of power there. Tommy Pham is a decent home run and stolen bases threat. Joey Votto. Stevenson, if you need a catcher, is fine. Moustakas struggled last year, but has a ton of power, as we've seen over time. If people are sleeping on Nick Senzel, I don't actually hate him hitting sixth there. He's a toolsy kid, post-hype prospect kind of a guy, and he's going to be super cheap and low owned. 2,300 on DK, 2,100 on FanDuel, multi-position eligibility, and nobody on him. He could have a sneaky good year, so I wouldn't totally sleep on Senzel. On the Braves side of things, I love the Braves stack again this year in terms of just all the power that they offer. Ridiculous home run hitting team. They added Matt Olson. They lost Freddie Freeman, but went out and got one of the best home run hitting first basemen to replace him in Matt Olson. So getting to a ton of Braves where I can afford them. Is the Braves a team that you're stacking here?
Well, I think that the matchup versus Mahle is pretty average. The team total of 5 is solid. I mean, they got a good lineup. So I think that okay. So the ownership 8.7%, top stack percent 9.7. They look like a good team to stack up for sure. Definitely in the mix.
Yeah. I'm concerned with the strikeouts, and then I'm concerned a little bit with Mahle. He's also very good at limiting barrels, limiting hard hit, 33.9% hard hit rate last season, 6.5% barrels. So he's also difficult to hit a home run off of, but there's just so many home run hitters, so many power hitters in that lineup that I am getting to some Brave stacks there. Let's jump over. We'll take a look at the Houston Astros with Framber Valdez on the mound going up against the Angels with everybody's darling Shohei Ohtani on the hill. Ohtani is available as a pitcher today, not in the hitting pool, so you're going to have to struggle with that in terms of if you want to go to Angels stacks. There are some bats in that Angels lineup, but taking him out of there as a bat really hurts them. In terms of pitching, he's highly owned on the DK slate, 24%, not extremely highly owned, but he's popular. Framber, only 5.3% on DK, 1% on FanDuel. The price is kind of up. Framber's an interesting pitcher in that he really limits power. He just saps the power out of the other lineup. He had a negative 5.5 degree average launch angle last season and a 70+% ground ball rate last year. So he's very difficult to hit home runs off of. You can hit the ball hard against him, but you cannot elevate the ball against him. So he suppresses the Angels stack a little bit for me, but that doesn't mean I'm getting to a lot of Framber here. I'm getting to some Ohtani, not a ton. How are you viewing the pitchers? How are you viewing the stacks on this one?
So I think that this seems like one of the games that is pretty decent for stacking up. LA this time of year. Let's see. The weather actually is going to be quite warm for LA. The temperatures are in the 80s during game time for this one.
Beautiful.
So I think compared to games with like 40 or 50 degree weather, that stands out. The pitching, Ohtani, definitely a solid pitcher, and Valdez as well. So I think you could take some stabs on Ohtani on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I don't think he goes deep enough in games to really make him a good option. But DraftKings at 7K, that price is right. The only problem is Houston, they don't strike out. So I think that maybe not my favorite pitcher tonight, but that price of 7K really is kind of like it seems low for his talent. What do you think?
Who's it for Framber?
Ohtani.
For Ohtani?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even notice that his price was that low. Wow. Yeah. 7K on DK. I was looking at the FanDuel price. Everybody knows that's where I play most of my action. So I hadn't actually noticed that. That's a mistake price. Yeah. And that explains some of the popularity that he's drawing over there for sure. 29.3% strikeout rate last season, 138 and a third innings in 23 starts. Like you said, not a ton of depth for Ohtani, but that strikeout rate for that price is, very, very nice. Like you just mentioned, though, this team that he's going against does not strike out. In the first 6 hitters in their lineup, the average strikeout rate is 14.7%. That's ridiculous. And that includes Yordan Alvarez at 24.2. If we take Alvarez out, we're talking about we're talking about 5 hitters that have a 12.8% average strikeout rate. That's ungodly good at putting the ball in play. So that Astros stack is going to be in play all season long, again, regardless of who they're going up against, just because of how frequently they put the ball in play and the power that they've got. So it's keeping me off Ohtani a little bit at the 10-5 on FanDuel, but I think at the 7K on DK, he's definitely in play where you need 2 pitchers.
Definitely. I kind of almost like I like the Houston stack against Ohtani, given that at that price point, I think a lot of people are going to be clicking him.
Yeah.
And
Houston, and there's hitters that you just love in that lineup.
Yeah. The Houston stack, only 5% ownership on DraftKings, 10% chance of being the top stack. So that's really positive leverage. Similar on FanDuel, 5% owned, 8% top stack. So it seems like people might be a little bit scared off Ohtani, but I think that the weather being so much more advantageous in this game compared to the rest of the slate makes a difference. Although the Arizona game has pretty good weather too.
Yeah, that's another spot. We'll get to that one in just a sec. But yeah, I definitely, for me, I'm chasing some of those Houston bats. I don't love the Angels stack here. We were talking about it in Discord this morning, especially with like 22% ownership on Trout and then 11% on Anthony Rendon. I like Rendon to have a bounce back season. He struggled through 249 plate appearances. Mike Trout is one of the best players in baseball, if not the best still. But the rest of that lineup trails off pretty quickly. I do like Jared Walsh as a hitter. They've got Max Stassi in the middle of the lineup there. Brandon Marsh has not really totally come around. Joe Adell's got a ton of power in his bat, but it hasn't gotten there at the major league level yet. So I don't really love getting to the Angels stack. Maybe I'll grab a few Rendon one-offs. Maybe I'll grab a few Jared Walsh one-offs. I'm probably not using Trout in a one-off situation. You getting to any Angels here?
So I think the Angels are really tough to stack up because Ohtani, you can't roster him as a hitter.
Yeah.
And like, as you're saying, the rest of the line besides Trout and the top of the order is kind of not as strong. So it does seem like a stack that's going to be a lot less appealing than you might expect. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it's like our top stack percent. That doesn't necessarily take into account the fact that Otani, you can't play him. So the
Right.
chance of actually getting the right stack of the Angels is lower. So I think that not a team I'm particularly excited about.
Yeah, yeah, and especially again against a pitcher like this who just keeps the ball on the ground with such consistency. It's just not a spot I'm chasing. So, looks like the Astros and maybe some shares of Otani on this one. Let's jump over. We will hit our last game here. 4 minutes or so until the FanDuel slate locks. Then we're going to stick around for like 25 minutes, talk until 2:45 about some strategy, answering some questions that you guys might have. We've been ignoring the questions because kind of had to hit the accelerator here, but we'll jump over to them. Looking at the Padres, Pod's got Yu Darvish on the hill. Diamondbacks have Madison Bumgarner on the hill. I've written about Mad Bum a few times. Only 32 years old for everybody who thinks that he's some ancient washed up pitcher. I like Mad Bum for a little bit of a bounce back season here. He pitched really well through spring training. He wasn't as bad as people remember 2 years ago as last year in San Francisco in 2019. So I like a little bit of improvement from Mad Bum. Might not start today, and I am getting to a fair amount of the Padres, which I don't love because I don't think this is the greatest lineup in the world. I think they're a flawed lineup while Tatis is out. But talk to me about this game, both pitchers to start with. You getting to any shares of Darvish or Mad Bum?
Oh man, Mad Bum being only 32 years old makes me like you make it sound like that that's not old and not washed, but I can assure you that at 35 it's quite possible to be washed. But
I'm about to turn 43 and I could go out there and give you a few innings. Come on.
I would like to see that, man. We got to have a softball game or something. That
would be so much fun. We'll add that to the schedule when we do the convention.
Yeah. So I think he didn't have a horrible year last year, like 4.6 xFIP Mad Bum. I'm talking about that's like probably a little bit worse than your average pitcher, and the strikeouts are also a bit lower.
Yeah.
But this isn't a guy that I'm looking at and being like, you should definitely stack against him. That being said, the weather in Arizona is very favorable. It's like 90 degrees there today. So the weather conditions plus the fact he's below average really make this Padres stack pop. But I see what you're saying. It's like beyond the top guys, like the bottom of the order, like Hosmer, Nola, Profar, like no power to speak of, not much stolen base upside. So that's one
they're
where
gonna
you
struggle to turn that lineup over, I think.
Yeah, you gotta just hope they get on base and get knocked in.
Right.
Which isn't the worst thing for a stack, but yeah, I think this one's a tough one because the top of the order is super high owned and then the bottom of the order isn't very good. So it makes it tough to stack up.
Yeah. I think one sneaky hitter in there is maybe Jake Cronenworth, depending on where he lands in the final lineup. At least on FanDuel, he's pretty low owned, more popular on DK. You can maybe get away with Hosmer, but I don't know that Hosmer's necessarily going to be in the final lineup going up against a lefty. I think he will, but they could work in a couple other hitters in that spot. And then, the bottom of the lineup, Jurickson Profar is not, never really came through to his prospect pedigree. Ha-Seong Kim, we saw excel in the KBO a couple years ago during the pandemic, but has not come through at the major league level. So not really a stack I'm getting to at the back end. I am getting to some shares of Trent Grisham, Manny Machado, but like you said, they're super popular. Luke Voit, one of the most overrated hitters in baseball, in my opinion. There is decent power there, but he doesn't do a whole hell of a lot with it. So I know he led the league in baseball in the wonky shortened season, but in terms of home runs, but that was a career high. He's only hit 22, 21 home runs as his career highs. So he's never really come out and had the 50 home run season that people think of him as. So overrated. I'm undercutting him in terms of ownership. Are you getting to any Diamondback stacks going up against Darvish? I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, I think the weather makes it worth taking a shot or two on him. Let's see here.
When I say not, I'm getting like 4% of their stacks in 150 lineup. So I'm getting a little bit, but not a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I think that they're somewhat interesting, but not one of the top teams tonight for sure.
Yeah, that's how I was seeing them too. Guys, that brings us up to the lock for the FanDuel slate. I think we covered all the games as we were flying through there. If we missed any, apologies to everybody that locked up on FanDuel, but I'm pretty sure we covered everything that we needed to for that. We were thinking of using this time, guys, for, like I said, some Q&A. and to go through a little bit of just basic strategy. We've got a little bit of a gap before the next show starts. So there's going to be a canned video of Greg and Alex after we talk coming up at 2:45. We've got about 20-25 minutes to chat here and just go through some of the basics of MLB DFS. So some of the topics I came up with, and I think off the top, the biggest, most important one to me is hitter stacking. So we'll get into that. We're brought to you again by Prize Picks, guys. So stick around. Make sure that you're hitting the like, the subscribe button, all of those good things. Make sure you're checking out Prize Picks. But if you've got questions, drop them in the chat, drop them in our Discord. We'll try and catch those, and we'll go through this. If you want to start us off, Alex, like I said, I've got stacking as our first topic here. But do you want to give any like overarching thoughts as to how you go about DFS and putting your lineups together before we get into like the specific mechanics of stacking and why you want to do it?
Yeah,
like you mentioned weather a lot during the show. So weather seems like it's something that you look at, for example. What are things that you think of in Target?
So, I mean, the thing about baseball is like, okay, if you're transitioning from basketball to baseball, the projection in baseball it matters a little bit less because the range of outcomes for players is so high. Like a batter projected for like 6 points could get anywhere from 0 to like 40. So like you can take some like pretty long shot plays and make it work in baseball. So it's always fun. And the ownership is a huge factor for that reason. So like a lot of times the best team on the slate might not be like one of the best stacks because the chance of them succeeding just is a lot lower than the ownership. So it's really fun from a game theory perspective.
Yeah, I love it. It works like no other sport really does. It's very event-based, and we're chasing those events, and we're trying to maximize our scores every time one of those events happens. Somebody hits a home run, we want to have as many pieces of that home run as we can. So if we're stacking guys, we're getting the guy who walked ahead of the hitter who hit a home run. So we're getting his walk, we're getting the run scored when he gets driven in by that home run, we're getting the home run points and the RBI and the run points from the guy who hit the home run. If you can do that with a grand slam, that's the magic, right? That's really what we're chasing. So we want to chase stacks with good on base skills, home run hitters, a lot of power, a lot of ISO, like you were saying. And we're just looking for some of those premium bats, but chasing the most highly owned plays of the day. It's not like basketball where we need to lock in some of those plays because the highly owned plays are the best plays of the day. Yeah, the highly owned plays project out well, but this is a sport where if you succeed a third of the time, 30% of the time, you're going to the Hall of Fame. So it just works differently in terms of how baseball comes together, how it works through these lineups. So let's talk a little bit about stacking. That's kind of what we're chasing with the correlation. So what's the why behind why we're chasing hitter stacks?
So there's a few reasons why like players on the same team are correlated. The obvious one is like if less guys get out, then that's more plate appearances for everyone else. So if on average baseball game, like a guy batting fifth gets like 4 plate appearances, then if they get that 5th plate appearance, that's like a 25% increase to their projection for the whole team that you have. So I think that is a big reason. There's some other reasons like the runs and RBIs correlating, and that's huge on FanDuel where those are weighted a lot more heavily. And then finally, pitchers perform worse when there's runners on base because they have to pitch. They can't pitch with that wind up. They got to pitch. I can't remember all the terminology. You probably know
from the stretch.
From the stretch. So the batter stats actually go up when there's runners on base.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just, we're chasing that correlated scoring as much as possible. When you're building stacks, are you typically building full stacks of a team? And I'm talking, 4 players on FanDuel, 5 players on DK. And are you building 2 stacks for every lineup? Like, are you taking a Padres stack and a Atlanta stack and putting those together with a pitcher and then, maybe doing it as a 4-4 or a 4-3 on FanDuel? Is that your approach? Or do you typically go 1 stack and then some one-off guys? Like, what's your general thought process about how to build the stacks?
On FanDuel, because the runs and RBIs are worth a lot more, you almost always want to have two team stacks on FanDuel, either 4-4 or 4-3. Like generally, if you make a lineup that's less stacked, you want to have a good reason to do it. Like if you pick too expensive stacks on FanDuel that you can't make your stack work, then getting that cheap one-off to make it all fit, that's a great strategy. If you're just pivoting off Mike Trout to get Bryce Harper, not ideal, because like your lineup's just not as good as the one that has that stack. So like I'm saying, if you have an Angel stack and you have Rendon, Walsh, Stassi or something, and then Mike Trout, and you swap them out for Bryce Harper, that's going to be a net loss, even though both are fantastic players. So you want to be smart about how you build the lineups and like why you might stack less. Just have a good reason for it.
So then on the DK slate, you mentioned, you're more focused on the full stacks on FanDuel. Are you more willing to let some of those one-offs creep in around the edges on the DK slate where you're running like a 5-man and then maybe you run 3 one-offs, or are you looking at like a 5-2-1 still primarily over there?
Yeah, on DraftKings stacking, there's more possibilities because you can get the 5-person stack, and that's kind of like, because you get 5 of that one team, and you can't have 5 of 2 teams. Like obviously, then hitting that top stack, like with that 5-person stack, is like that much more important. So that makes like your secondary stack like a little bit less important because it's only 3 guys or 2 guys. So a 5-person stack's generally enough stacking for your lineup in DK. Having a 5 plus a 3, that's even better. So like if you stack less, again, it's you want to have a stronger lineup as a result.
And then as you're building the stacks, if we're doing it through Fantasy Cruncher, they give you the ability to define the maximum number of gaps between hitters, right? Like a 1, 2, 3, 4, or a lineup that will allow a 1, 3 and so on, or a 1, 4, how many spaces between the hitters are. Is that something that you worry about? Is that something that you have a specific setting for? Do you bounce back and forth depending on the teams? What do you look at there? Because we are chasing the guys who are going to be hitting close to one another in a lineup. But the way that lineups turn over, I find a lot of the time you can still have a workable stack with guys who are separated by a few hitters. It doesn't necessarily matter. So what are your thoughts on that? I don't know that I've ever really heard you talk on that.
Yeah, I think that like having guys all in the same order, like 1, 2, 3, like that is an advantage. I don't think it's enough of an advantage to really go out of your way to target. So I don't mind stacks with a lot of gaps in them, especially if you have a 5-person stack on DraftKings. Like then it almost doesn't matter what order, because there's only like so many gaps between guys you can have.
Right.
FanDuel a little bit more important, and the run RBI correlation is more important. So be more likely to try to like keep guys closer in the order on FanDuel.
Okay. All right. So another one that's a little bit different from site to site. And that's important to remember. I mean, that 5-man does make a difference. If you can get to 5 of the 9 hitters, like you said, there's just mathematically not going to be a lot of huge gaps between those guys. So you just get a little bit more. Looks like we got a little super chat came in here from our pal Pot Pharma. Sent a $4.99 super chat. When stacking, are there any spots in the lineup that you target? Like maybe the leadoff, the 3, the cleanup hitter. Are you looking at that in terms of lineup spots specifically, rather than the name on the back of the jersey, who these players are? Are you just kind of targeting, I want the top 4 hitters in these different lineups, or are you kind of just spreading it around based on who the hitters are, what they're priced at, and all of that?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting idea. Like they generally have the strongest players in those positions, so it's certainly like guys that you want to target are likely to be the number 1 player, or number 1 in the order, 3, 4, etc. But stacking can make up a little bit for guys having bad positions in the order, because if there's more at bats in the game, those guys are gonna get a higher percentage more of their projection boost, basically, because like the 9 hitter might be like averaging like around 3 plate appearances, and if they get 4, that's a 33% boost, where if they're going for 4 to 5, it's like 25%. So like sometimes if you stack up the bottom of the order, like you can have guys that have a low projection that can really overperform. The problem is like most teams don't have that depth where the lineup is strong throughout the whole order. So in practice, like you might want to pick some spots with that.
Yeah, and that's a key point in that is, it depends on who our 8, 9 hitters are, how they work. If you've got a monster power hitter who's a sellout for power, monster strikeout rate guy, you can chase that guy as an end cap to a middle of a lineup stack and use his power to help, score the other guys. Similarly, if you've got a guy with a really good on-base acumen and some speed in the 9 spot, you can use him as a second leadoff hitter, wrap him back around to the top of the lineup. So it really depends on who the hitters are for me in a lot of these cases in terms of how I'm going to deploy them. And you also see a lot of times the top 4 hitters in the lineup, they're going to be the best hitters in most lineups in just from a baseball perspective. They're also going to be the most expensive guys. They're also going to be the most highly owned guys. So you're kind of just drilling right into what the public is looking at if you're thinking of it that way, where you can find a lot of value in looking at a 6 hitter. You can find a lot of value in looking at a 9 hitter. So I do like chasing those alternate constructions a lot of the time. Let's see, what other questions did I have on this list? Are we always stacking? Are you making exceptions? Are you allowing alternative constructions lineups that don't stack at all into your pool of 150 lineups? Is that like, do you leave 10% of those lineups for that purpose, or are you always stacking?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can make some good lineups if without stacking. The caveat is it's a lot harder to like tell what's a good lineup and what's not, because if you just put 9 players that are all good plays in a lineup that are all different teams, that might not be a good lineup. So you got to have some good reasons to build a lineup like that. So I generally don't recommend it unless you're pretty advanced.
Yeah, and to me, it's like, we make the dart throw analogy all the time with tournaments and picking some of these players at longer odds or low ownership or whatever. And to me, that kind of extends even further here, where if you think about it in baseball, if you're choosing one-off, you're trying to throw a bullseye with that one pick, where the stack, the rest of that correlation, you can miss the bullseye, hit an 18, hit a 7, and it just adds up and you get to a decent score. In a lineup that's not stacking, that's not correlating, you need to bullseye that most of those times. You need to hit those bullseyes, those 20s, to really build up that level of a score that you could potentially reach with a stack. So it's just like you were saying, to me, it's just more difficult to do it that way. You're really threading a thin needle when you try and go that route. But I typically don't leave room in my pool. I usually just go for a fully stacked. I'll go different constructions across 150 lineups. Today I played mostly 4-3-1s on FanDuel. I like getting to some one-offs early in the season, but for me, I'm not really building in too many that are going to be just wildly on stack like that. I might go down to a 3-3 with 2 one-offs, a 3-2 with a couple of one-offs in there, or maybe a third stack where I'm doing like 2-2 and something like 2-2-2, something like that. But that's really the limitations of it. I don't do too much where I'm just throwing in a bunch of random guys. So I think that covers us mostly on the stacking topic. As far as pitchers go, we've got some differentiation between the 2 sites. We get the 1 pitcher requirement on FanDuel. DK, you need to use 2 pitchers. You get some differentiated pricing, and just the mechanics of it are different. So how do you approach the 2 different sites in terms of how you think about pitching from one site to the other site?
So on FanDuel, like the scoring system, it matters a lot more how deep in a game you go. So having a guy that throws a lot of strikeouts with fewer pitches is not as good on FanDuel as it is on DraftKings. And like that's because on DraftKings, like on average, like an at bat is going to get a pitcher like about 0.1 fantasy points or something like that. It's just like such a small fraction that it doesn't even matter. Where on FanDuel you're getting like 1 point per out. So and then the quality starts.
That quality start is big.
So I'm definitely looking for guys that can go a little bit deeper on FanDuel. On DraftKings, they also make the salary cap a little bit tougher. So going into some cheap guys that just get a lot of strikeouts can be a good play.
Definitely. And then as far as the quality start, that's an interesting wrinkle on the FanDuel slate. And like you're saying, that it does extend the need to get to some depth. So these guys are going to pitch effectively into a start. You got to get through 6 and give up 4 or fewer runs to get to a quality start. So I have a little board that I put together that's looking at quality start percentages. The leader last season in terms of guys who pitched more than 20 starts was Walker Buehler. He made 37 starts, including the playoffs, turned in 27 quality starts, a very, very strong season, 72%. So you're talking about the league leader was at 72%. That's taking Trevor Bauer and Jake DeGrom off the top of the board. Those guys were 82% and 73% respectively, but they only made 17 and 15 starts. And it drops off very, very quickly. The 14th ranked pitcher on the board is Kyle Gibson, and he's already down to just 60%. So it's difficult to hit these quality starts. So it's an important factor in FanDuel lineups, a little bit more so, I think, than we even necessarily discussed, because it is thin with the pitchers that are reliably getting to that level. So it's definitely something that I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to this season. And it is something that I think is, somewhat predictable in that guys do typically pitch to, similar depth, and you can look at the talent numbers. As far as how you use pitchers, are you typically chasing aces? Are you chasing values? Does that differ from FanDuel to DraftKings? And how do you go about like which pitchers you're deciding on using?
So I think on FanDuel, it's a lot tougher to like pivot off the aces because they just don't they don't make the stacks for the best teams like expensive enough to make that like a reasonable option. And then like there's usually like 3 or 4 guys that like one of them is going to have a good game and be the highest scoring pitcher. So like the chances of a random guy being one of the highest scoring is a little bit lower on FanDuel. And we actually have the top pitchers tool to help you like put that in perspective. On DraftKings, because you need to make them fit on their salary cap. It's like pretty much anyone that's not totally like not throwing enough pitches or like doesn't strike out guys. Like if they can get strikeouts and they're stretched out, then they're probably a reasonable play.
And when you're talking about DraftKings, are we looking to typically chase a higher end pitcher combined with a cheaper pitcher? Are you looking to go to, 2 guys from like the mid range of salary a little bit more? Like how do your combinations on DK come together? Or like talk about today's DK slate since it hasn't started yet. What are you looking at in terms of your top combinations of pitchers over there?
So I think it's like the general pitcher combinations I land on are a lot of times like one expensive guy and one like mid-range cheap guy. Mm-hmm. That's because like you don't want to totally cheap out on the stacks. In general, like allocating more of your salary to bats is preferable to pitchers, but generally there aren't enough, or like it's easy enough to make stuff fit on DraftKings with like one of the higher price stacks plus like a star pitcher. So you can kind of fill out the rest of your lineup with some value pieces to make that work.
So for today, I mean, we've got Ohtani sitting at that $7K price on DK. That's pretty juicy over there. I like Mad Bum a little bit, like we talked about at 59. Are those kind of the guys that you're targeting for that SP2 spot, and then combining them with like a Bieber, like a Yu Darvish? Max is one of the expensive guys, but I don't think we were overly excited about him. So I guess that's really kind of, we've got 2 expensive guys and then a lot of mid-range and similarly priced guys. But does that make those guys kind of shine a little bit more than some of the other also rans on that slate then, having pitchers of that caliber at a discounted price?
Yeah, definitely. I think that so what I'm looking at on today's slate, if I was doing single entry, I would probably pick a Houston stack. And okay, so Houston we have at being only 5% owned, but a 10% chance of being the top stack. The problem is they're like super expensive. So to make this work, you need to get some value pitchers. So Ohtani might not be my favorite because it just seems like he's going to be popular, and he's not that much better from a fantasy perspective. I wouldn't pick him in this lineup anyway because he's facing Houston. But right. Going to like Tyler Mahle, he's looking like a guy that's a little bit underowned. I'd probably go with Bieber and Mahle. Because that seems like you're not spending too much on pitcher. You can really get the stack you want.
And is that something that typically informs how you make that decision? Let's say it was a differently shaped board where we had a few similar choices at like a 7,000 Ohtani. Let's imagine Ohtani not pitching against the team that you want to stack. And then you've got guys like Mahle at a fairly similar price. Let's say there was one other guy a little bit cheaper. are you using the hitters that you want to stack to inform who that guy is when it's, say, a $300 difference between guys? Are you typically saying, all right, I want to decide on this? I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question well. I'm putting in ace pitcher, I'm putting in my stack, and then I'm building in my second stack, filling out my hitters, and then deciding based on how much salary I've got left between those three pitchers of similar quality and different prices? Or are you saying, these are my two pitchers, let me see what hitters fit in around it from these stacks that I like? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I think like if I'm hand building, usually what I do is I'll pick out two stacks, put all the hitters in, and then whatever pitchers work that are like, obviously you want to pick the best pitchers you can, but that's I'm just going to pick the best options of what's left of my salary cap to fit around the stacks, because I feel like it's the stacks that really win you the tournament.
Yep.
Pitcher performance is a lot more easy, like a lot less variant, and you like they price the guys pretty well. So in general, unless there's like a big pricing error on the sites, which isn't terribly infrequent, you're not going to do too bad if you just fit whatever pitchers work with your lineup.
That makes sense. Doesn't look like we're getting a ton of questions coming through in the chat here. Everybody's mid-season form, I guess, but we'll jump over. It's talk to me a little bit about like how you put it all together. We've talked a lot about, making decisions within a lineup. Like you mentioned, you said it perfectly, is when I'm hand building, because we are doing a lot of this through Fantasy Cruncher and automating the process. So with that process, when you're getting lineups, you run a ton of lineups in Fantasy Cruncher. Just talk to us a little bit about how you're putting all that together in terms of choosing the lineup, sorting through which ones you want to actually drop into the tournaments.
Yeah, as far as Fantasy Cruncher, we just dropped a video this morning on how to set up MLB, so make sure to check that out. I just went over the basics, so that will help you get started if you aren't already using Fantasy Cruncher. But like the thing with Fantasy Cruncher, like you have to like turn on a lot of randomness to get like a good differentiation in baseball. You're gonna make a lot of good lineups, but you're gonna make a lot of bad lineups. So if I'm building 20 lineups, I'm gonna want to like make 60 in Fantasy Cruncher and then pick out my favorite 20. Like the more lineups you're choosing from, the better your options are gonna be.
And are we typically weighting that on, you're looking at projection to a degree, but like we talked about, not necessarily the most important thing. Are we typically weighting that on leverage versus the slate ownership and how they rank in our top stacks? Is that how you're kind of approaching the stacking decisions?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's basically three levers you can pull. There's ownership, there's projection, and there's correlation. So with the correlation, it can be easier to like pick out your stacks before you build lineups. And then like Fantasy Cruncher automatically optimizes for projection. So you're going to know your lineups have good projection. And then ownership, you can kind of sort them by ownership. So like you can account for all those three factors pretty easily as long as you start with the correlation.
Excellent. And then, well, it looks like Chris wants us to punch out here. We've got a video coming up. I was going to ask one last question. Are you at all concerned about salary in baseball? Do you care about leaving salary on the table, and how much are you willing to leave on the table? Does it matter to you at all?
Yeah, I think that it's always fun to leave salary on the table, but in general, like in baseball, there's like so many different possible combinations of players that I don't know if you can get like an advantage leaving money on the table, because like basically the only way that would work is if you spend up on pitcher and you pick some really cheap stacks. Otherwise, it's just like too easy to just make your lineup better with the extra salary. And I don't think that going for like the cheapest stacks is a good strategy. So I don't end up leaving salary on the table very often.
Okay. But is it something where you're like setting a requirement? I want this lineup to spend at most leave like 1,000 on the table, let's say on a FanDuel lineup, or are you willing to take lineups? Because sometimes, based on who's hitting where in a lineup, if you're stacking and you're getting to the quality hitters in a good stack, sometimes just the way that the salaries work together and you're still getting a good second stack, a good pitcher, quality lineup that projects well, and you're still, you might come up 1,000, 2,000 short on the salary. Are you willing to enter a lineup like that? Or are you typically going to try and jump in there and make some changes to drop a better hitter or something in there? Or upgrade the pitcher?
I would definitely try to figure out if there's some pivots to make if I had more than 1,000 on the table. But in baseball, like it's not like such a huge priority that you have to spend your extra 1K. That'd
Yeah,
probably,
it's not like we're tanking
yeah,
a lineup because we didn't maximize the salary. Is basically
yeah.
the point.
Like there's still a reasonable chance that every player in your lineup does well,
Mhm.
and like the salary cap isn't like as big a deal.
Yeah, and it's not rate based, so it's not rate per minute per dollar or any of that. So
Yeah.
it's just a different way that the math comes together on it. So, guys, that brings us down to the end of the show. It flew by for me. I hope it was fun for everybody and informative for everybody. We missed probably a little bit of business in here, so let me take a quick look. Awesemo MVP plan. That's our text messaging SMS platform. There's a phone number floating around somewhere. It'll be on the next show, I'm sure. The phone number is 660-656-4417. That signs you up for our text messaging program. It gets you access to our beta testing for new tools and features. All kinds of stuff coming up there. We've got a video coming up. Then we've got a second live before lock show at 2:45 to 4:05. We've got NBA Deeper Dive and NBA Live before lock coming up after that. Stick around, guys. Like and subscribe.
What is going on, guys? It is the start of the baseball season, and right here I'm with the man, Alex Awesemo Baker. We're going to talk about the MLB season and just how to approach building lineups using some of the tools that are available over on Awesemo.com. Do us a favor as you guys are watching the video, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and leave a comment below if you have any questions or just any got an insight at all on any of the stuff that we have going on the site. First, Alex, how are you doing? And then also, how you feeling about baseball season starting?
Doing good. Yeah, stoked about baseball. We're adding a lot of betting this year, so I'm like, man, these are going to be some epic 15-game parlays and stuff. And then from a DFS standpoint, like it's pretty interesting. There've been a lot of rule changes recently in baseball. Like you got that 3-batter per reliever rule, and then this year they added the universal designated hitter. So and I guess my old edge of only going with American League teams because there are more combinations of stacks might not be as effective this year.
Yeah, it kind of evens out the playing field, especially when we get into the World Series. But now just kind of talking big picture here, somebody signs up for our site for the first time, and there's a lot of data. There's a lot of different tools, a lot of different information. What's the first thing you would recommend people to look at when it comes to our site and just helping them get information to build MLB lineups?
So the first thing I'm doing any day that I'm building MLB lineups is I'm looking at our game's going to be postponed today because there's absolutely nothing worse than you set your lineup and then you get that big fat 0 because the game didn't happen. So we're always projecting what we think the chances are that a game will be postponed. So you can find that on the projections page among other places. So CL 0% here. So that would mean I'm good to start building some lineups without worrying as much about a rain out.
Yeah, and that's also something that, in general, we shouldn't have to deal with in NBA. But of course, every once in a while, there's a leaky roof. There's a building that catches on fire when a game's being played. I think it was a Toronto game a couple weeks ago. So, in general, this is something unique to MLB DFS, where we do have to pay attention to the weather, and it's something that people should keep in mind as we start a new baseball season. And then also, something that's way different about baseball is just overall the variance of it and how we're looking to make stacks, maybe to try to correlate players together. So I want to ask you that also is, what is it about MLB DFS that makes it more different than, say a sport like PGA or NBA, for instance?
So I definitely approach MLB a lot differently than NBA in particular, because it's more like focusing on the big picture as opposed to like the little pieces. So there's like so many batters and pitchers on any given slate because a lot of times you got 15 games of MLB going on that like a lot of times it's like you just pick 5 guys from the team and you got to get lucky after that. It's more focused on like how the team's going to do overall than the individual players. So, I mean, how do you usually kind of like think of MLB differently than other sports?
Yeah, ownership matters a lot more. It's not to say that ownership doesn't matter in a sport like NBA, but, in general, let's say, LeBron is late scratched and some 3K players starting and we're projecting him for like 30 fantasy points. There's just not that much variance in NBA compared to baseball, where baseball, you can get somebody who's a minimum salary hitter leading off. It doesn't guarantee that they're going to get any hits. You could get somebody who easily scores 0 fantasy points. It's not something that happens as much in NBA, which is also why I think we should go over to the projections page and just kind of look at what some of this information means and why it is important for baseball. So when you're thinking of ownership when it comes to MLB DFS, Alex, why is it so much more important than it is in other sports?
I think the ownership is more important than MLB because the projections are less important. I mean, it's kind of a circular argument, but you got to have some sort of edge that you're looking for. Now, when it comes to pitchers, like, you pretty much have a good idea of how many points they're going to score. Like, that's where the projections really come in handy. It's going to be like plus or minus 10 to the projection. And usually if you get more than the projection, like, which happens about half the time, you're going to be in a good shape. So you don't have to worry as much about that. But the hitter variance is insane. So, like, you might have a guy projected for 8. You don't have any better idea if he's going to get 0 or 20 points. So you can really kind of go for some long shots in MLB. And because of that correlation, like, you can put a bunch of guys that individually might be bad plays together, and then that could be a good play.
Yeah, and one thing that stands out immediately for anybody wondering, the projections we're looking at right now, just opening day for the 2022 season, just to kind of get a feel for, what some of the data is that we're looking at right now. And then as we go through, we could look at some of this information and draw conclusions. And one thing that stands out to me at first glance, Alex, is, there's like, 10 or so of the most popular plays of them. Nearly half of them are San Diego Padres hitters. What do you make of that information when you look at the projections page?
Yeah, so for this particular slate, there's one game that's really hot in Arizona, and then all the other games are like 40 or 50 degrees because the MLB like starts insanely early in the year. So, like, obviously that one game is going to have like so much better conditions for batting than the other games. But even like the best hitting conditions are far from a guarantee. So, like, that's where the top stacks comes in. We have the Padres as average of 23% owned, but only a 16% chance of being the highest scoring stack of the day. So that's where you can be like, okay, I don't know exactly what team's going to go off today, but I could be better off taking the field than a very popular team, even if they are good that day.
And then just looking at the top stacks page for reference right here to what you were talking about before, we have the Padres showing as projected for a 16.2% chance to be the top stack of the slate, while also projecting for a 23.4% ownership share. For somebody who's looking at this information for the first time, what do those numbers mean?
So the top stack percentage it is out of 100%, obviously. So it means that San Diego, 16% of the time, is going to be the highest scoring stack. And I think it's usually safe to say that the highest scoring stack is going to be the winning stack in a GPP. There is some salary cap constraints that if San Diego is more expensive, maybe a value stack might sneak in there. But generally, the bats win you the tournament, and the pitchers, this is whatever the best ones are with that stack. So we can say, okay, 16% of the time, San Diego is going to win the slate, but that means 84% of the time it's going to be another stack, and 84% is a lot bigger than 16%, obviously. So that kind of gives me the confidence that even if I think San Diego is in a great spot, which they are, you can get a lot of ownership advantage just by taking some slightly less popular teams.
And then looking at our leverage score, which for those of you, if you just look at the math, I think most people will be able to figure out that the leverage score, it's ownership share minus top stack percentage. When you see a team that's so negatively leveraged like the San Diego Padres, I know you said that means that there's a lot of other teams that are, maybe under-owned or a better chance to succeed relative to their ownership percentage. But looking at a team with the negative 7.2% ownership share in San Diego, if you're playing 150 lineups, would that make you want to go underweight to the field on Padres stacks, be off them altogether, just use some of these hitters as one-offs? Like, where would you stand on that kind of strategy?
It definitely doesn't make me want to fade the team completely. Like, you can still use them. The important part is you need to have at least a couple plays in your lineup that are more likely to succeed than the ownership if you hope to get an advantage on the field. So if you go with San Diego, you best be picking some stack that might be a little bit lower owned or some pitcher combination that no one else is going to have, because if you just pick all the best plays in MLB, they're not that likely to succeed, and a lot of people are going to have them. So that's the worst combo.
And then I want to ask you about the top value percentage column here, because top value percentage is this team's odds to be a top scoring stack, relative to their points per dollar. And I want to know, when would you value the top value percentage, and when would you be looking more at just the top stack percentage?
So the top value percentage, since people are looking for value when they build lineups, that often explains why the ownership is high on some of these teams. So most of the time, the top value teams are going to be pretty high owned. And on this slate, it's not a huge factor, but you got Pittsburgh with 21% chance of being the top value stack. It's only 7% chance of being the top stack. So sometimes you can find some really, really good fades of just an average team that's cheap that everyone's going to be on. But for some reason, I always find it's the Kansas City Royals too. But it's this team is 500 for a reason. So most of the time they're not going to succeed. And if you can figure out that a lot of people are going to be on them, that's a good fade.
And then as we also kind of use this to launch into talking about pitchers, I want to know, how often would you be looking to maybe stack against a top pitcher that might be projecting to be overowned in our tools?
That can be a really interesting strategy to get leverage directly on some high-owned pitchers. So the one thing is, generally building a stack against a really good pitcher, or a really good pitching spot in general, is not the most profitable way to build a lineup, just because that can be a low percent chance. And just because the starting pitcher on the other side does a little bit worse, that doesn't mean that you're going to get the highest scoring stack. That's still a lot of other things that have to go right. So in general, I think that you can make some solid lineups banking on that leverage. And there's some instances where a bad pitcher is high owned, and then you can really profit on leverage. But generally, you want to kind of pick a less uphill path to success than kind of a unlikely chance that a top pitcher is going to completely blow up.
And then we could start looking at some of the top pitchers now too, if we bring up the top pitchers tool. And one thing that stands out as this comes to opening day, and not that we're talking about, strategy individually for opening day, but I do think it's useful to look at these tools with some sort of context of the players. A pitcher like Robbie Ray on DraftKings for the first slate of the year is crazy underpriced. He was the AL Cy Young this year, and for whatever reason, DraftKings puts up the pricing. Maybe they forgot last year happened. They're like, look, Robbie Ray wasn't great 2 years ago. So they open up the season pricing him at $6,300. As a result, he's projected right now for 66% ownership. He has the best odds of being a top value pitcher, the best odds of being one of the top 2 scoring pitchers overall on DraftKings. So how would you weigh all these factors? The cheap price, the high likelihood of success, and then also the really high ownership.
Yeah, I think that one's a head scratcher, because in Minnesota on Thursday, it's supposed to be 36 degrees. So if this game happens, then the conditions are going to be really good for Robbie Ray, who's an awesome pitcher, at least based on last year, which is about as far back as you want to go with a pitcher. So he's an awesome play. But everyone's on him. That's one of those spots where I think you just look at the numbers. He's projected for let's see, in the projections we have him for 20 points. If he goes over 20 at 6K, you're not gonna. He could be a winning part of a GPP for sure. That's gonna happen half the time. So sometimes you just have to take those odds, even though he can't win you a tournament. He can only lose you a tournament at that ownership.
And then just looking through some of these numbers and just the other pitchers we have here, and the pitchers in general for opening day, even though it's a lot of aces, the only guy who's really expensive, at least on DraftKings for this slate, is Max Scherzer, 10,700. I just want to know your take, looking at the numbers we have available to us. Who else would you be prioritizing just based on the information we have here, and why? If somebody was looking at this, how would they arrive to some of the same conclusions that you do as, one of the best, most successful DFS players ever?
So I think that on this slate, it does look like the value falls off pretty quick. Ohtani at 7K, really tough matchup versus Houston, but that one looks kind of interesting. You can go for some leverage with Max Fried or Shane Bieber. guys that have a higher chance of being one of the top 2 pitchers of the night compared to their ownership. And like I think that usually the way I build lineups is I'll pick my stacks and then I'll make whatever pitchers that fit in with that lineup. Because I feel like pitchers don't usually win you or lose you the tournaments. It's the stacks.
Yeah, and for sure, there's not every once in a while a pitcher will throw a no-hitter or something like that. But in general, I agree with you. It's a lot of times the team that goes out and scores 20 runs, they're nearly guaranteed to be the team that's going to be in the optimal lineup, where pitchers could have a little bit more variance, even though the top-end pitchers like a Max Scherzer are generally a lot more consistent than, you know, some of the lower-end pitchers or top-end hitters. Alex, is there anything else you want to tell the people as we head into the first slate of MLB DFS? Just any kind of overarching thoughts or strategy standpoints?
Yeah, I mean, MLB is really interesting from a strategy standpoint. One other thing I'd say is just because like one guy is high owned and another is low owned doesn't mean necessarily that like that combination of players will be low owned. Like, because like sometimes you're building your MLB lineups and it kind of like funnels you into a certain construction. Like you pick that expensive stack at Coors, like almost all those lineups are going to have that cheap value pitcher and not many are going to have that like stud pitcher. So like thinking about things like from a higher level and just being like, okay, this combination of players might be a little bit less popular just because it's tough to make work. That's where it kind of like plays your advantage and you can make some interesting stacks. Like you don't always have to go like 5-3 on DK or 4-4 on FanDuel, but when you do deviate from that, you want to do it for a good reason, like being able to fit some guys that are tough to fit.
Yep, totally makes sense. And then also keep in mind, every time you guys are stacking, you're playing multiple players from the same team. It's just added correlation in a sport with a lot of variance. So just a way to try to capture as much upside as possible, because I know that's going to be something popular as we start baseball season, is just people asking us, why is stacking important? And, you know, I kind of laid out some of the reasoning right there, but I think that's a good thing for us to close with is, Alex, why is stacking so important for MLB DFS in tournaments?
So the reason why stacking is so important is because, okay, so each player in an MLB game is like going to average somewhere around 4 plate appearances. But if they get that extra 9 plate appearances for the team, then that's a 25% increase to their projection, essentially. Plus, you got the fact that, like, if guys are on base, that generally makes batting statistics go up. In addition, like, if there are more runs on the board, they're going to face weaker pitchers on the other side. So you got a lot of variables kind of like working in your favor if you pick a lot of guys from the same team. Doesn't work every night, but playing the odds and in general, stacking is a proven strategy.
That is going to do it for us. Thank you guys very much for watching. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Good luck this season.
Baseball's a sport, right, Greg?
Yeah.
Right.
There's collision sometimes, and you have somebody who's physically trying to stop you from scoring.
There you go.
All right, it is the start of a new season. I could not be more excited because, number one, I like MLB DFS. Number two, if I'm being honest with you, Gundacker, I'm getting a little tired of the NBA season, just a little bit tired of what happens at the end of the year. We have to deal with all these crazy rest situations and all that, but it's good just to have something fresh to talk about, which is what we have today in baseball. Do us a favor, guys, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, if you guys have any questions, throw them into the YouTube comment section. We're going to be able to answer those a little more than we normally would, especially given just the start time. We're in the middle of the day. If you guys have any questions in the Discord chat, throw those in as well. At me on them. How you feeling about the start of baseball, Gundacker?
I mean, I'm excited first and foremost that it's back, and then in true baseball fashion, we're getting maybe new users, new MLB DFS players are quickly learning about how weather does play a role here. So there are some uncontrollables that are involved in this game that we don't quite have in others, even though, you know, speaker fires and roof leaks do happen. But weather's a real thing, and we've lost a couple games. We've pushed some games back. So if nothing else, it's a fast lane of learning, and you're going to learn today.
Speak for yourself. I have the ability to control the weather. It's not something everybody could do. I can. It's one of the things that gives me a little bit of a leg up on the DFS competition. Is on a whim, I'll change the weather. I'll make it rain. I'll make it snow. Change the wind. Lots of ways we could go about finding edges. Is there anything else? And if you don't have anything, that's totally okay also. But for people who are just tuning in, we did a FanDuel live before lock earlier. We're doing the DraftKings right now. But if you guys have FanDuel questions, you could throw those in as well, and I'll answer them. But is there anything you want to tell people just overall about strategy of baseball, or anything they should be aware of for this particular slate?
I mean, this is, other than pitching, this is the ultimate chalk is bad sport, right? That chalk has a negative connotation throughout the industry. But in basketball, we see 50% own Luka and Jokic. They'll get there. In baseball, those 50% own, we don't really get 50% own stacks, but it pays to be contrarian long term. Sans pitching, I usually almost agree with the chalk pitchers if it's an ace-like guy. But yeah, don't be afraid to be contrarian.
All right, so let's start talking about this slate. And I think the fact you just mentioned ownership is going to be really key, because the most popular play on today's slate is Shane Bieber. That's also the first game we have here to talk about. We have the Cleveland Guardians now. That's going to take me a second to get used to. I don't know if this hit you at all, but I was running my lineups in Fantasy where I was like, what the hell is this logo? It's been like 5 times it's happened to me where I just get confused when I see it. But we've got Shane Bieber on the road against the Kansas City Royals. He's the chalk of the slate. I'm not exactly sure what to make of him from this perspective. He was ridiculously good 2 years ago. Last year he struggled a little bit, but it was also injury related. He had the shoulder injuries coming back. And here's another factor also. He didn't pitch much in spring training. He maxed out around 30 pitches. So while right now he's my most rostered pitcher, I'm still kind of even with the field on him. How are you handling Shane Bieber? Because I think this is the key to this slate, and also a really tricky one with a lot of different narratives to it.
Yeah, another nuance we deal with, at least in the first week of the season, is knowing where guys are at, especially with pitch counts, how many pitches you might expect from them. Bieber definitely fits the bill if we don't know anything. And I know he pitched like they call it backfield ramp ups and stuff, but it wasn't in front of like a StatCast camera. So it wasn't really, you didn't know what his velo's at, what his spin rates are at. And you just don't know what you're getting from him. What we do know is if he can be the 2 year ago Shane Bieber pitcher, he's probably the best pitcher on this slate. And I think that's what the field is hoping for. I'm with you. I was sitting about 50% right now. I think there's plenty of options, a couple ways to zig and zag, but I've also included a couple Royal stacks just in case Bieber ends up folding. And this is, right on to the, don't be afraid to be contrarian. Hey, if the highest owned pitcher goes down, then that means that stack's probably going to be low owned. So I want to be above the field on that Royal stack.
Yeah, man, we're on the exact same page. So like I said, Shane Bieber is my most rostered pitcher. While the Royals aren't my most rostered stack, far from it. It is a team that I'm getting exposure to because of it's twofold. Number one, the ownership on Bieber. And then part two, I just really don't know what we're expecting out of him. So, and the other thing too, because people are talking about potential pitch limits, Bieber could go out and throw 70 pitches and still be the highest scoring pitcher on the slate just because his strikeout stuff has been so good in the past. But there's a wide range of outcomes when it comes to Shane Bieber. And this is why I think it is a game to attack on both sides. As far as cash games go, if you were playing a cash game lineup on DraftKings, would you still have Bieber as one of the pitchers? That is a yes for me.
Yeah, it'd be one thing if we can, replace his potential ceiling and probable floor, considering this matchup, this stadium. He's just kind of underpriced for what he could be, and he's underpriced for even if he's only 90 to 85% of the pitcher that he was 2 years ago. So I agree. I'll just take the ownership at that rate and hope he doesn't give me negative.
Yeah, good way to put it. I also hope that in lineups that I have Shane Bieber with the live that he does not come up negative. That is unless it's with one of my Royal stacks that just goes off the low ownership, because there's nobody on this team that's currently projected for more than 10% ownership. There is one individual value play that I think we should point out here, and that's Bobby Witt Jr., one of the best prospects overall in baseball. Not only did he make the Royals lineup to open up the season, he's also only 2,300 at hitting second today. So to me, I think Bobby Witt, at least as a one-off, is contrarian, not paying much ownership. There's a lot of upside there. And I think that he's somebody that you could throw into some lineups to kind of differentiate that don't have Shane Bieber. We've talked about the merits of Royal stacks. Which players you want individually, and what do you make of Bobby Witt, who I do like as a value play?
Yeah, those big prospects, they get called up. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You end up being Jared Kelenic for half a season. But he's going to have the opportunity to see maximum amount of pitches and at bats today. And at that spot, he's too cheap for what his implied expectation is of being a big league pitcher. I will get to him definitely. Whit Merrifield is in most of my Royal stacks. Leadoff guy, decent average. Not going to have a lot of pop, but I'm not expecting a ton of homers today throughout the slate. So some of these OBP guys that have some stolen base potential, I'll take some shots on. So Merrifield, Bobby Witt, fill the role. Salvy's a professional hitter. He'll make the lineup. And everything else is just kind of tertiary. I guess Benintendi falls more often just because he's right there in between that Witt and Salvy sandwich, I guess we would call. That's weird. Why did I say that?
We also have a question because we are primarily talking about DraftKings because they already did the FanDuel live before lock, but we could also, like I said, hit on some FanDuel questions. And 8Game in the YouTube chat did ask, where are we guys at for Bieber on FanDuel? We just talked about it on DraftKings. Let me pull up my FanDuel lineups. My most roster pitcher on FanDuel, this should come as a surprise to nobody who watched my shows last year, is Corbin Burns. Off to a little bit of a rocky start. Do you remember last year? I think it was like 50 strikeouts before he walked anybody. Walked the first hitter of the year he faced this year on 5 pitches. He struggled with his command a little bit, and through 2 innings, he has yet to strike anybody out. So, no real damage against Bieber on FanDuel yet, but against Burns on FanDuel, but 2 innings, no runs, no strikeouts. So not quite ideal, but I'm pulling up. I was using that to stalls. I pull up my.
You see what Hendricks has got going on?
Yeah, it looks like he is this a body swap? Is he just Corbin Burns right now? When is Kyle Hendricks striking? And also Hendricks sucked last year. Yeah. But when is he striking out 6 guys? And he's like 0.8% owned on FanDuel or something.
Yeah, I didn't touch him, and now I wish I did.
Let's see. So Bieber, not Bieber. I keep calling everybody Bieber. Hendricks is 0.9% owned on FanDuel through 2 2/3 innings, 6 strikeouts. Is he gonna break in the slate at less than 1% ownership?
Welcome to MLB, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's see. As for Bieber on FanDuel, so there's a couple reasons I don't like Bieber as much on FanDuel that I do on DK. Number 1 is I had Corbin Burns at my disposal. Mm-hmm. Number 2 also is the pitch count matters way more on FanDuel than it does on DK because of that quality start bonus. Yep. DK, he could go out pitch 5 good innings, strike out 7 hitters, pick up the win bonus. No big deal if you don't get those few extra points for the quality start. That does matter more on FanDuel. So FanDuel, I had him in. I have him in the teens for me in terms of exposure. It would have been higher had Corbin Burns not been an option. But how do you view Bieber on FanDuel as compared to DK?
His mama don't like me, and she like everyone, first of all. But secondly, yeah, I have him as one of my top 2 tiered guys. I was thinking him and Fried would end up being my top 2 owned at the moment. So I definitely have Bieber as probably the highest ceiling if he's pitching up to what he could be. But he's also got a pretty safe price point to where, I'll take 15, 16 if he gives it to me. And, relative to the rest of the guys, I think that's what I would expect the most out of from some of these other cats. So Bieber's probably going to end up being my highest owned DraftKings pitcher.
Yeah, for sure. Did you play FanDuel lineups also or just DK?
I reserved some FanDuel, and I wish I didn't because I just had to lock in Corbin Burns, and I figured I'd late swap in since there was only 1 game difference. But Burns is might have to dig out of a hole. Hey, he's still young. He can do it. He might pop off here, but yeah, rough start.
And let's see. We've got, Hendricks just worked out of a jam. He had a couple runners on base. I believe it was in the 3rd inning, but 3 scoreless innings, 6 strikeouts for Kyle Hendricks. This might be more than he struck out in any individual start all of last year. And he's done the first 3 innings. Do you remember early last year, we had Hendricks chalk against the Pirates, and he pitched an inning and gave up 10 runs or something like that. Kyle Hendricks is he's come to pitch this year. That's also something else that I think we should mention is that there's wild variance on pitchers and players year to year in baseball, more so than other sports. Whereas Shane Bieber was no doubt the best pitcher in baseball 2 years ago. He was pretty human last year, ended up getting hurt. So Wide range of outcomes. Let's talk about Zach Greinke, a pitcher who I assume is on the decline right now, because not only is he older and have the results diminished, the velocity has dipped in a big, big way for Zach Greinke. He's back in his roots, back with the Kansas City Royals. His average fastball velocity last year was well below 90 miles per hour. I don't see enough strikeout upside to want to roster him at all, especially because so many of the pitchers are so cheap on DK today. What are you looking at when it comes to Zach Greinke?
Yeah, a lot of his velo lines up pretty well with Kyle Hendricks, and right now I don't know what to think. But yes, I have none right now. He's not even in my pool, and I have some Guardian stacks that almost slipped there.
Yeah, it happens. This is part of getting old also. I don't know if this happens with you, with like parents or older relatives or whatever, but when they call, like when my dad will call the Colts, like the Baltimore Colts, and I'll be like, how old are you? How old? And now I'm starting to understand it, because I see the teams that have known as being one team name or one location for so long, they change somewhere else. And there's still part of me that's like, oh, St. Louis Rams. And it's just not the case anymore. So I'm a little more sympathetic to him not always knowing where teams are from or the location, because easy to slip up on that sometimes. I'm with you though, Greinke. Let's see, over the course of 150 lineups on DK, and I have to do another run right now because the D-backs lineup just came out. I have him in 4 lineups right now, and there's a good chance that it ends up being lower. So if you absolutely need salary saving somewhere in an expensive stack or something like that, okay, if he's in 1 or 2 lineups, not the end of the world, but very, very far from a priority for me. And on the other side, when it comes to Cleveland, this is a pretty shitty lineup, but you did say you're making some stacks of them. So shitty pitcher, shitty lineup. Looks like you're going with the shitty lineup over the shitty pitcher, though.
Yeah, usually I can expect bad hitting to beat bad pitching at the major league level. And Greinke has shown some power problems to righties. So one of the guys I got my eye on is potentially Franmil Reyes to be able to lift one, but it's not the greatest hitting environment or stadium today.
Let's see, where am I at when it comes to Cleveland? Off the top of my head, I think I'm fairly light on Cleveland and light on Greinke. It's just a spot where I look at it as like, hey, I hope we get, it's like 6 innings, 3 runs, and like 4 strikeouts from Greinke or something like that. Because I don't think there's that much upside on either part of the game. The only thing I will point out is that obviously Jose Ramirez is a very, very good hitter and is by far the best hitter in the Cleveland lineup. Unfortunately, I was hoping he would get traded to a better team. It looks like there was a possibility of that happening, but they were able to reach a contract extension yesterday, so that's no longer the case. So I have Jose Ramirez actually well overweight to the field. He's in about 20% of my lineups right now, and I am underweight to every other hitter in this lineup. So Jose Ramirez is an individual one-off, no issue there. You mentioned Franmil Reyes. Yeah, he's power upside, but he's also 10% owned, which I think is about reasonable when it comes to him. But Ramirez as a one-off, is he somebody that you like getting to?
Yeah, power and speed. Sure, I'll take him. He's never a pushback on J-Ram.
And I get that he's 5,600 on DraftKings, but it's not like we need to save salary that much for pitching, right?
Exactly.
We've talked about the merits of Shane Bieber, who's the chalk play on the slate, but Bieber's 8,300 on DK. It's not a steep price tag. Then you look at the other guys, Yu Darvish is 9,500. Max Fried, you mentioned liking him. He's 9,000. A lot of times, particularly on opening day slates where we're looking at, generally like the DeGroms, Scherzers, Garrett Coles, those kind of pitchers, they're usually like, $11,000 to $12,000. We just don't have that on this slate today. So it's not all that hard to pay up for offense. Anything else you want to talk about when it comes to Cleveland here?
No, but to touch on what you're saying, value is extremely subjective when it comes to hitters. And if you can fit them. Don't worry about ROI or expected value or multipliers, nothing like that. And if you're new to DFS, we're going to get 10 and 11K pitchers within a couple of weeks. So take the implied value at pitching right now.
I have good news. Started the bottom of the 3rd inning, back-to-back strikeouts for Corbin Burns. My guy never lets me down. Never lets me down. Actually, I have a signed picture of Corbin Burns over here. That's the next thing that's going to go up on my wall. As I'm starting to decorate. It took a very long time for me to decorate my office, as people are well aware. But I have a signed Corbin Burns picture. I just need to get a frame for it, and he'll be up. He is responsible for my biggest betting win ever last year. Just absolutely crushed. And I'm going to be forever indebted to Corbin Burns and always playing him in DFS lineups. And I hope he keeps being good. So anything else you want to talk about? Cleveland, Kansas City Royals, or should we move on to the next game?
No, I mean, keep an eye on weather reports, but for the most part, no.
All right, the next one, the Pittsburgh Pirates against the St. Louis Cardinals. The Pirates, who are not expected to be good this year because they never are. And they're going up against Adam Wainwright, who also an older pitcher, potentially on the decline, but he's maintained relevance and he's reconstructed himself and has done a good job just in terms of changing pitch mixes, changing speeds to be able to continue to be successful at the major league level, even though he no longer has the stuff that he did earlier in his career. Starting for the Pirates, JT Brubaker, who was kind of under the radar decent last year. He was somebody who, particularly at the start of the year, was able to generate some pretty good DFS starts. And if you look at his ERA, yeah, it was only 5.36, but his underlying numbers were better. He had a 4.67 expected ERA, also good strikeout rate, fairly low walk rate last year. So I think that JT Brubaker, at least for DFS purposes, is somebody who makes some sense as a contrarian option. Do you like getting into Brubaker at all?
I hadn't, but I certainly understand it. You mentioned those underlying metrics leave some hope. 12% swing and strike rate, barrel rates could be better, could be worse. If you need it, take it. I will get to some, but it's not like a core piece for me.
Yeah, not a core piece for me either. But if people are looking for a really cheap SP2 to get to, I prefer Brubaker to Zach Greinke, who people were asking about before. And he's a little more expensive at $7,500. But still, nobody's getting to Brubaker right now in our top pitchers tool. We do have him with a 13% chance to be one of the top 2 scoring pitchers on the slate and only 5.8% ownership. So that in itself, I do think gives us a little bit of reason to want to get to Brubaker. And then on the other side with the St. Louis Cardinals, it's a team without the highest top stack odds in the slate, but looks about appropriately owned. 8% chance to be the top stack, 7.5% ownership. I'm about even with the field on them. I think that Brubaker, like I said before, is maybe a little bit underrated. So Cardinals not really a team that I am dying to get to. How are you stacking this team? And are there any one-offs that are catching your eye?
Yeah, I do have some Cardinal stacks. Brubaker's kind of weird. Like his underlying metrics don't really say he should be giving up a bunch of bombs, but in the last year, at least to righties, he's got a 1.6 plus home run per 9. To righty. So I have found myself getting to a guy like Tyler O'Neill, who last year had a ridiculous barrel rate. The offset is he does strike out a lot, but that's the risk you're going to have to take. So I do have some of him. Goldie in the 2 spot, I'll take some. They just have a fun lane of hitters with Goldie, O'Neill, Arenado. Pujols in the 5 spot on opening day. I mean, I could do without. If he falls out of these stacks, I'm sure he will. Sure, but I like that 3-man Goldie, O'Neill, Arenado to maybe play into what has been Brubaker's bugaboo, and that's homers to righties. But again, the park is more so on the pitcher side, and so are the hitting elements. So not a core stack by any means.
And let's talk about the other side of this game, because Adam Wainwright, quality pitcher, at least we've seen in recent years. But do you have any concerns here about his age and just the kind of diminished stuff he's had? I know he was still successful from a run prevention standpoint, but he is now over the age of 40. And not only is he over the age of 40, but he had his lowest career average velocity last year. Is any of that a concern for you entering this year? 3.05 ERA looks great. The underlying numbers weren't quite as good, and he's another year older.
I mean, it's theoretically a concern for me. I'm going to let it play out because we have seen low hard contact rates coming from him. So sometimes, higher velocity will also correlate with high hard contact. He's been able to induce a lot of soft contact and also a lot of ground balls. So while I will be looking for regression as the season progresses, I'm not that concerned because of his pitch type. A lot of curveballs, a lot of off-speed stuff to really pitch to contact. As far as playing him, I ended up liking him more for FanDuel, like you said, maybe eating those 6 innings, getting that quality start, imply for the win. That means a lot bit more on FanDuel than it does on DK. But if you look at this Pirates lineup, there's a lot of strikeout potential. So I did find myself actually getting to some Wainwright on DraftKings as well.
Yeah, and in most matchups, I wouldn't like to roster Adam Wainwright just because as good as he was last year, he didn't strike guys out. And that's going to be an issue for just his overall upside in fantasy. He had a 21% K rate, and that's been pretty consistent with him over the last few years now at this point in his career. He's a high teens, low 20s strikeout guy, and I don't think that's going to improve at this point. If you look at most projection models for him, he's like an 18 to 19% strikeout rate. But here's the catch. He's pitching against the Pittsburgh Pirates. And that's where I think we could look at, and it's also a smaller slate. So that's kind of where I look at this and be like, hey, could we get, 6 innings, 5 strikeouts out of Adam Wainwright and Could that be enough to be optimal today? Yeah, I think so. There's not a lot of slates where I like to get to Wainwright. I hardly rostered him at all last year, but this is a spot where I'm going to be playing him. Now, on the other side with the Pittsburgh Pirates, this is one of our most positively leveraged stacks on the slate. Now, why are they positively leveraged? Not because they have great odds of success, but because nobody is rostering them at all. This team is only projected for 3% ownership today, the lowest of any team of the entire day. And then considering maybe some of the concerns we have about Wainwright's age, does this make the Pirates at all an intriguing contrarian stack for you?
Yeah, you don't have to give up much equity to say you got there. And they do strike out a bunch, but there are some decent ISO rates. Daniel Vogelbach leading off, his type of power, you're going to give him 5 at best to swing it. I'll take a shot. So I do like him. I'm less enthralled as we start adding more people to a potential stack, but Vogelbach and Reynolds, those guys are guys that can give you some home run potential. So I those two also bat in 1-2. I like that quite a bit. It falls off a freaking cliff after that. But I'll take Vogelbach and Reynolds to battle today without question.
Yeah, and I mean, so I'm overweight to the Pittsburgh Pirates right now. And once again, it has nothing to do with me thinking they have great odds of success. It's just that they're so not popular that it's easy to get overweight to the field on. I have 5% Pirate stacks right now. That's nearly double the field. And then something else also that kind of works in their favor. We do have an 18.2% chance to be the best value stack on the slate. So with that in mind, I think there's a good chance that, let's say there's just a bunch of maybe like Mike Trout homers, Juan Soto homers, and then the Pirates put up like 4 or 5 runs, maybe Bieber and another one of the, like Yu Darvish, one of the other stud pitchers goes off. Then I think you might need that value at offense. And this is not an advocation for saying like play a bunch of Pirates, but if you're playing 150 lineups, I think it makes sense to have like 5 to 6% stacks and then just be overweight to the field. If you're somebody who's playing 1, 3, 5 lineups, I wouldn't be considering them at all. So that's where I'm at here with Pittsburgh. Are there any individual hitters here that are making it into your lineups more than others?
From Pittsburgh, it's Vogelbach, Reynolds.
Okay. Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. Those are some individual guys with power upside. Wouldn't be surprising at all to see the Pirates put up 2 runs today, and one of them be a solo home run from Vogelbach, solo home run from Brian Reynolds. Reynolds, somebody who also underrated hitter. If he ends up finding himself on a contender, I think a lot of people will realize that he's somebody who's a pretty quality MLB player. Now, let's move on to the next game. New York Mets at the Washington Nationals. But first, shout out to our sponsor, Prize Picks. If you guys have not signed up for Prize Picks yet, you can do so using the promo code Awesemo. It'll get you up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit and also get you 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. So Prize Picks, we don't quite yet have our props up on Odd Chopper for baseball season, but they are coming soon. And of course, also we have them for NBA as well. So if you guys are looking to place any prop bets over on Prize Picks, you can check out Odd Chopper. Baseball will be up there before too long. All right, the Mets at the Washington Nationals, and the Mets are going to be one of the more popular offenses on the slate going up against Patrick Corbin. From the Mets side, Tyler McGill is starting. He had a standout rookie season, one that might be getting slept on a little bit because he's only projected for 9% ownership today. Gundacker, what do you take away from McGill's rookie season, and what do you think he'll look like in his second season?
I mean, he's got to throw strikes, right? I have, let's see, scroll back. I had it in order because they moved it back. He had, a 1.28 whip. I'm looking for a little less traffic, and I'm looking for him to tighten up his efficiency against lefties. Had a 507 xFIP to lefties last year and allowed a lot of power, high fly ball rate. So that's going to be a problem going against guys like Juan Soto, and maybe Josh Bell can cash in on that. But on the other side, against righties, he was borderline elite, 284 xFIP, near 30% K rate, just a 212 average allowed, kept the ball on the ground, 54% ground ball rate. So he was Jekyll and Hyde. This is a Nationals lineup that projects to be pretty even, but there's going to be some switch hitters that can be in the left batter spots today and give them some fits here. So it's the ultimate risk reward. Past Juan Soto, the other lefties, Juan Soto, Bell, and Cruz were the main guys I was looking for him to get past. So I do have some shares of McGill, but not a lot. And I actually do have some Nat stacks to hopefully cash in on them home run problems.
Yep. I think that could make sense. Once again, it's a young pitcher in Tyler McGill. And I don't know exactly what to make. He was not a well-regarded prospect. I know he had good minor league numbers, but at least in the major league level, there wasn't that much expected for him. He did have a 3.84 expected ERA last year. The strikeout numbers were pretty good. The strikeout numbers were good in the minors as well. So I think Tyler McGill, there could be reason to have some merit there. He is going under-owned in our top pitchers tool, but in the most recent build I did, I was not really able to get to him very much. I only have him in a couple of lineups here. So he's kind of just a lower tier pitching option for me, kind of in the same vein as like a Zach Greinke. If you have a couple lineups with him, not the end of the world, but I'm personally not going to be prioritizing him. Let's talk about the Nationals going up against him. And they do have one individual hitter who is one of the best in baseball, Juan Soto. A lot of people thought he should have won MVP last year. He's an overwhelming betting favorite to win him. Have you looked at the betting numbers for futures this year?
I look at a couple of them. I haven't caught up in the last week, but I know Soto is he's up there, right?
Yeah, he's like a 3-1. He's like 3-1 to win MVP, which, for reference, if you go in the AL, like Trout is 6-1. Ohtani's 10-1 or 6-1 or something. I forget the numbers off the top of my head. So you've got Juan Soto in the National League is by far the favorite to win the MVP there. And, more so than the top players in the American League. He is also going to be a very popular individual hitter today, projected for 27% ownership. How do you handle individual hitters that are picking up this much ownership, but generally for good reason?
So I tend to be more numb to individual ownership and just really focus on stacks. I just fully sell out for stack exposure. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Juan Soto there's a elite few or Sotos, the Trouts, guys like that I almost don't care. If I can fit them in lineups, it happens. And I don't overthink it. I tend to more so look at stack ownership than individuals, unless it gets too egregious.
All right. What are we doing here? Who is showing up to chat and is like, what is it? What are we doing in the algorithm that porn bots are showing up in chat and being like, oh, you guys like Greg and Gundacker? You know what else you like? Naked people on the internet. It's baseball. How turned on can you be by baseball? I know there's a stick and ball involved, but come on. What are we doing? I guess bot algorithms, get better. Any concerns about the weather with you for this one? You mentioned before that the start time has changed. It was supposed to be a 4:00 start. It's gotten pushed back to 7. There is some rain in the forecast. Is that anything that's on your mind at all?
I mean, the Nats certainly haven't been associated with smart weather moves, but it sounds like they're getting applauded for moving this game back. So at last check, it looked like they should be clear to play, but I'll always keep my head on the swivel and keep an eye on it. But right now I'm expecting it to play, and I'm assuming that the pushback was a net positive for full 9 innings.
Yep, totally agree. I think the reasoning for moving the start time back was so that the rain would not be an issue. If this was a situation where I think they would have been really concerned about the game being canceled, I think they would have just called the game early. The reason that I think that is because that's what we've seen a bunch of other teams do already today. We've seen other teams where it's like, hey, Yankees, Red Sox, Mariners, Twins, there's weather in the forecast. Guess what we're doing? We're just canceling the game ahead of time so people don't show up. Something that I wish MLB teams did a little more often. Have you ever gone to a baseball game where you sat through like an hour and a half rain delay and they just canceled it? It's like, oh, cool. They just got me to spend $100 on like drinks and food.
No, but yeah, I've certainly seen a lot of tilt on Twitter where we know, and the newbies that are introduced to MLB DFS, you'll be a weatherman in 3 months. You'll know that the game's not going to play, but the team always kind of sits on that announcement. And yeah, you feel like there might be some ulterior motives, such as selling $15 beers.
It looks like we have our first run of the baseball season.
Let's go.
The Milwaukee Brewers are up 1-0. They have put a run on the board. Let's see, how'd they score? It was from just really exciting. Not you'd think that you'd get a little more power in the National League with the DHs in there, no more pitching, but it's a couple of singles, a hit by pitch, and then a ground out to produce a run. Either way, though, we've got the Brewers on the board 1-0. Let's go. Let's knock Kyle Hendricks out of the optimal lineup. Let's get no win bonus for him. Let's do some damage, Brewers. Let's get Corbin Burns his wins also. So anyway, yeah, I'm on the same page. Looks like no real weather concerns for me, but let's talk about Patrick Corbin now and his matchup against the New York Mets, because the Mets are expected to be fairly popular today. They are projected for 21% ownership on DK, making them by far the most popular stack on the slate and the most negatively leveraged, because we have them with a 13.7% chance to be the top stack. You know how I like to handle these situations, Gundacker. I'm going to have some exposure to the Mets, but not nearly as much as the field. This is the most negatively leveraged team on the slate. Patrick Corbin sucked last year, but I'm having at least some optimism that he could bounce back. My hope is this. The Mets have a 13.7% chance to be the top scoring team on the slate. I hope that any of those other 87% outcomes come. Just give me any other team as a top scoring team, and I think I could be looking okay today. I'm only going to have a handful of Mets stacks. I do not want to be anywhere near the 21% that the field has them at. How are you going to handle the Mets as a stack when they are this popular?
I was at 20% myself. I was in line with the Padres and Mets stacks. But I was setting my exposures before looking at the ownership. So I agree with the main guys, the Martes. I would probably say I can look at guys like Canna, McNeil, and even Escobar to an extent. Like some of those guys I don't trust as much. So maybe I'll just pluck away some of the fat. But Starling Marte looks really good to me. And Pete Alonso is one of the top couple guys in my bomb detector. So I could forego the stack, but I won't give up on Marte and Alonso. And hey, maybe that's a way to steal the best of that stack and move forward.
Yeah, so by the way, in terms of individual hitters, Pete Alonso is my most rostered first baseman right now. And I do have a good amount individually of Starling Marte as a one-off, but just as a stack, I don't have anywhere near the amount of exposure to the Mets as the field has. I think it's a great spot for them. I understand it on paper, but ownership matters so much for MLB DFS, and I just think they're too popular. There's a lot of variance. I don't want to be playing a team that's 21% owned when we have it projected for a 13% chance to be a top stack. So I'll be underweight there. There's a good chance it burns me, but I do think that is the right way to approach this slate. I have a little under 5% exposure to the Mets as a stack right now. Are they your most stacked team?
No, the Padres are.
All right, we're on the same page there. The Padres are also my most stacked team. I've been very anti Madison Bumgarner for quite some time. By the way, we just got the Mets starting lineup, so good time to talk about that. So I'll read this off. Let me know if you have any reaction to this or if it changes anything for you. For the Mets, Marte, J.D. Davis, Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso. We've got Eduardo Escobar. Robinson Cano is in the lineup. I wasn't sure he was going to play lefty versus lefty. He's also the flat min on DK. Then Kana, McNeil, and James McCann. So I'm going to have to update my lineups yet again now for Robinson Cano being in there. What do you make of that Mets lineup? Is there anything that's different than what you were expecting?
I didn't have Marte leading off. I had him second, but leading off, I like him even more.
Yeah, and I have to put Cano. So who did I think was going to play that I didn't have in? All right. Or who did I have in?
Did you say Nimmo?
I have to read off that lineup again.
No, it was Nimmo.
No. Yeah, so Nimmo is not in, and I had so Nimmo was dealing with I think neck soreness, so it looks like he is out. Robinson Cano is in, so that's the change to make there. And then I'll rerun lineups with Cano and without Nimmo. 2K for Robinson Cano hitting in the middle of the order. I know that he's not necessarily been the most upstanding citizen when it comes to steroid testing, and he's older at this point in his career, but flat min seems like a good source of salary savings, does it not?
No, stop. What? I think you just want that Met stack to remain what it is. It's like it's Albert Pujols in the middle of the lineup right now. It's rough. And if Patrick Corbin in his trials of suck, if there was one redeeming quality, he was still smoking lefties. So that's even less reason for me to get to Cano. But that said, Cano lefty.
I'm rerunning lineups. So I had none of him before. It looks like I'm getting to around 10% of him now.
Of Robbie Cano?
He's the flat man hitting in the middle of the lineup in a positive matchup.
What? This isn't NBA. What? He's still Robinson Cano.
Yeah.
I guess.
It's hard. It allows me to get to more of the hitters I really like on the slate. So I added Cano in. Here's what happens when I added Cano in. My exposure to Juan Soto went up. My exposure to Mike Trout went up. And then my exposure to Yu Darvish goes up. I don't mind any of those things.
All right. Yeah. The ends to a mean, I guess. Sure.
Is he my favorite play on the slate? No, far from it. Viable value option now to me, though, that we know that he's starting. Let's move on to the next game, and a couple pitchers that I think we're going to have interest here. Cincinnati Reds against the Atlanta Braves. Tyler Mahle and Max Fried both on the mound. So let's start by talking about Tyler Mahle, who was all over the place last year. He started the year great from a fantasy perspective, and then we got that crackdown on sticky substances. And what happened? There was an adjustment period for Mahle where he was really struggling to throw strikes, was walking a bunch of guys, but then he got it back together for the end of the year. Overall, his numbers look very solid. 3.75 ERA, 3.76 expected ERA. The strikeout number, 27.7, not quite as high as the year before, but clearly the strikeout upside. The matchup against the Atlanta Braves is very, very difficult, but with that said, he's only projected for 15% ownership. I'm going to bet on the strikeout upside. I like being overweight to the field on him. Are you willing to be with me and play some Tyler Mahle lineups against a very difficult Braves team just because of that strikeout upside?
Yeah, this is a spot where I'm actually just on both sides of the fence and multi-entry. It's just like whatever happens, I got it. I'm with you. His strikeout potential is up, and I was concerned about his xFIP and his numbers to righties, and so I did a little bit of light digging into it. If you want to isolate his home versus righties versus his road versus righties, like 15 of his 17 or 18 homers allowed were at home. So maybe the Great American Ballpark at home was his bugaboo, and that really helped increase his xFIP numbers if you were to remove the home cooking or the home performances out. So Mahle could be one of the best pitchers on the slate, and people just don't know it.
All right, good news from Chris. The bot has been booted. Turned out it was actually a Terry burner. So here we go. We thought it was. We thought, yeah, it was. Of course, it was Terry trying to sell his OnlyFans account. Terry,
makes sense.
Do that on your own time. Don't come spamming that in your YouTube chat, in our YouTube chat. Congrats on the business. I hear it's been very successful though. I hear it's been a wildly successful business for Terry. So as for the Atlanta Braves going against Tyler Mahle, I know you said that you like the upside there. You think there's a chance that they could get to Mahle. We did see some inconsistency out of him last year. New look Braves lineup. We've got Matt Olson in the mix. Ronald Acuna not quite back yet. But who are the hitters individually that you are getting into your lineups from Atlanta?
Yeah, so when I'm playing Atlanta, like I said, we give him Mahle his respect. I'm just betting on the talent. Who's the most talented guys in great spots? Well, half the team, if not more, has over 200 ISO and has chip in a chair to throw some pitches over the fence, and then we get into that Reds bullpen, which I'm not projecting to be anything insanely fearsome. So Rosario, Olson, Austin Riley, Ozuna, Albies, Duvall are my most commonly achieved guys in my Brave stacks, with the emphasis on Olson and Rosario. I really like the potential of Olson in this park. I have a lot of them on FanDuel. He's only 3,700 on FanDuel. 57 on DK. I imagine I'm still going to get to him quite a bit because of how cheap pitching is. But yeah, I'm more so betting on the talent here because Mahle was actually pretty elite against lefties last year. So that's why I'm almost evenly playing both sides of the fence with the leverage considered when planting my personal equity on each side.
Yep, I prefer the Mahle side just because there are not quite as many pitchers to roster today, and I do have some I don't want to be like 80% Shane Bieber or something like that. So I'm trying to spread out a little bit at pitcher and not be too crazy high on anybody individually. So that's where Mahle, I'm just looking for the strikeout upside. He's somebody I end up landing on. Same goes with Max Fried, who is going to be starting for the Atlanta Braves. He was excellent 2 years ago, regressed a little bit last year, but another guy also who came on in the second half of the year and posted better numbers post All-Star break than he did in the first half of the year. Now, I know before you were saying that Max Fried is one of the guys you have as a top tier pitcher. Is that still the case? And sell me on as to why.
He's one of my highest owned. I do have, let's see, this Reds lineup that I didn't project crazy for strikeouts, but I didn't update it. The Keno does give us a little bit of a boost. I just was kind of banking on a couple of years ago, kind of like what we're doing with Shane Bieber tonight. His overall metrics were pretty attackable. He throws a lot of strikes, so that's important. Get me into the 5th, 6th inning, hopefully hook a win. And he keeps the ball on the ground at a really high clip, over 50% to righties the last 3 years. And then, more ground balls than fly balls against lefties as well. So I do like the thought of him potentially being able to manage 5 or 6 strong, and he is implied for the win. So that never hurts.
I've got good news. The strikeouts coming back for Shane Bieber. 4 scoreless innings with 4 strikeouts. Now he's back on track. He's also got the 1-0 lead. So things are starting to look rosy for our guy Corbin Burns. Starting to get it going again. Took him a couple innings. Get underneath him. That Cubs team is going to be absolutely terrible this year. The Cubs are going to suck. So Max Fried, let's see, where am I at on Fried? I think I'm a little bit lower on him than you are. He's in the mix for me, though, of the pitchers I prefer. I prefer Bieber, I prefer Darvish, I prefer Ohtani, and I do prefer Molly to Max Fried, but I'm pretty similarly exposed to Molly and Fried. I just have some concerns with his strikeout upside, whereas the other guys I just think have more of a ceiling. I could see the logic to getting to Fried for sure, but we're talking about a guy who 23.7% strikeout rate last year, 22% the year before. There's just guys on this slate, the other ones I mentioned, who I think have the potential to get to like double-digit strikeouts. I don't really see that as a possibility for Max Fried. Pretty safe play though, and that could also be positive on this slate because I don't think there's a lot of security with a lot of these other pitchers. But are you looking to stack against him at all?
I wasn't, but I guess this could play as a plus part. Looking at this lineup, I think. Yeah, I'll get to some India. I don't think I'd get it to a full stack, but I would have some guys like Tommy Pham, Jonathan India, and probably Votto because we love us some Joey Votto.
There is no hitter in this lineup that I have double-digit exposure to. Max Fried, like I said, I think he's a pretty solid pitching option here. And the other thing too, when it comes to this Reds lineup, is, India is a good individual hitter. Votto, still it's a left-on-left matchup. He's pretty expensive. There's other first basemen I prefer. The one I'm getting the most exposure to is Tyler Stevenson, just because he's cheap with catcher eligibility. But other than that, I don't have anybody with more than 5% of my lineups. Is Stevenson somebody making into your lineups? If we didn't have to roster catcher on DK, I probably wouldn't be playing him that much.
No, I don't have any of them. It's because I'm getting a whole lot of Dalton Varsho, who could be leading off tonight. And yeah, he's leading off. You get a leadoff catcher, I'm just taking it. But I guess it goes against your Darvish exposure.
Yeah, I mean, I have some exposure to Varsho as well, but I mean, catcher just sucks in general. There's just a lot of different guys that I'm mixing and matching. There's not any one I feel terrific about, but as far as Reds hitters go, Stevenson is the one that I'm getting the most exposure to. Guys, if you have not yet signed up for our MVP program, you get exclusive Awesemo discounts and the first crack at beta testing our new tools and features as an Awesemo MVP. You could sign up by texting MVP to 1-660-656-4417. That number is also below in the link in the description box because none of us remember phone numbers off the top of our head. Just doesn't happen. But one more time, 1-660-656-4417. Also, if you text that number, we currently have a 50% off an Awesemo Plus weekly pass discount that is available for MVP program users. So really good thing to take advantage of if you are trying to get access to our tools for MLB opening day. Once again, you can check that out in the description box below in the video on YouTube. So let's hit on the next game now. We have a couple more to talk about. I'm really excited for this game. Of all the games on today's slate, this is the one I'm looking forward to seeing the most. It's the Los Angeles Angels against the Houston Astros. With the Angels in the Mike Trout era, there's always been injury issues. Trout has been hurt a lot. Ohtani, he got hurt a couple of years ago. If there's any time we're going to catch the Angels healthy, it's game one of the season. So we're going to see the Angels fully out there. I want to start by talking about Framber Valdez pitching for the Houston Astros. He's been a quality pitcher, also another guy without a lot of strikeout upside. I am not really getting to him at all today against the Angels. Do you think that's a mistake?
There's definitely strikeout potential in this Angels lineup, and they really showed strikeouts, high strikeout rates against lefties last year. And Valdez does have the potential to get you some Ks, but I also think his swing strike rate being just 10%, his propensity to lose the plate, walk rates pushing 10+% to 11% to lefties, almost 10% to righties. It's a high risk, high reward. I do get to some just because of the potential strikeouts in this Angels lineup. So yes, I'm getting to some, but it's not a warm fuzzy click. I'm just doing it on the merit that the Angels have a lot of 25+% K rates against lefties in this projected lineup.
Yeah, it's, Framber Valdez, number one, I don't like the matchup against the Angels to start the year when they're healthy. There could be times where this Angels lineup's a little bit watered down and there's guys out of the lineup. He also benefited from a lot of good luck last year. Well, he did have a 3.14 ERA, 3.84 expected ERA, 4.01 FIP. He had a 268 BABIP, and there's not anything that really indicates to me that he should just be a guy with great BABIPs because of the years prior, 312 BABIP in 2020. 319 BABIP in 2019. I think a lot of things worked in his favor last year. Also, not to mention a 78.3% strand rate. I think there was a lot of good luck with Framber Valdez. And then you couple that with he only struck out 21.9% of the hitters he faces. I don't like the matchup against the Angels. I'm going to be looking elsewhere. I hope he's not one of the higher scoring pitchers on the slate. If he is, so be it. I do like getting to the Angels. I like being overweight to the Angels because they have Mike Trout here. So if I'm not going to be rostering Framber Valdez, I might as well be going up against him with a lineup that I really like. So the Los Angeles Angels against Valdez, how do you feel about them when we got Mike Trout, Anthony Rendon? We can roster Shohei Ohtani as a hitter, which is definitely a little bit of an issue when it comes to stacking. But just the idea that we get guys like Rendon, Trout in the middle of the lineup, I like getting to Los Angeles. To you?
I mean, once you get past Trout and Rendon, it gets pretty flimsy. So I don't. If Ohtani was rosterable as a hitter, I absolutely would. I'd probably just stack them every day, no matter who they're facing. But I'm just grabbing Trout and Rendon where they fall right now. The rest of this Angels lineup, and what I'm looking at, isn't very menacing, especially power wise. So it's just Trout and Rendon right now. Maybe a smidge of Jared Walsh if he does end up being a top 4 in that lineup.
I can't believe we're at this point of Shohei Ohtani's career and FanDuel and DraftKings have not figured out a way to make him rosterable as a hitter and a pitcher.
I 100% agree. Like that,
and it shouldn't be that hard to do. Just make 2 different player cards: a pitcher Shohei Ohtani, a hitter Shohei Ohtani. You can roster them twice in different spots. Problems out. Apparently, that would break the entire DK pricing. Do you remember that one time where they actually labeled them as the wrong thing and like the slate almost had to get canceled?
Yeah, it seems like a simple solution, but we are years in now and they haven't figured it out.
Yeah, and once again, we're taking away what makes one of the most fun players in baseball interesting, and that's just not an option for us. We do have a new promo code for an MLB offer right now. It is Fastball. You can celebrate the return of the baseball season with a $1 MLB Express Weekly Pass. That is using the promo code Fastball at checkout. Also, that offer is going to expire April 11th. So if you want to check that out, hit that up now, or at least in the next few days before it expires. Let's talk about the other side of this game, because pitching for the Angels is the aforementioned Shohei Ohtani. Couple things going on here. Ohtani, ridiculously talented pitcher, but he's facing one of the most difficult offenses to go up against in the Houston Astros, a team that did not strike out a whole bunch last year. Also, potent lineup from top to bottom. They have got so many sluggers, and I know they don't have Carlos Correa anymore this year, but so what? This is still a loaded lineup. I'm overweight to Ohtani. I'm also overweight to the Houston Astros as a stack. I could see reason to think both sides have a lot of upside. Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, it felt like, talking in my circles that some people were scared to play either side of that. And I think you just have to make a decision, but it's not that hard to get to 7K Ohtani. He could get beat up and still be a fine play at 7K. And then the same with the Astros. They can get a couple runs of Ohtani and then leak through on the bullpen as well. So quality hitters on that Astros team. I love getting to Michael Brantley. He was almost free on FanDuel, and they still got some quality names. And Ohtani, as talented he is, he did have some power problems to lefty. So Yordan Alvarez, certainly a guy that I would not leave out. And Kyle Tucker has also really flourished in the PT he's getting. So I'm with you. I'm playing both sides of the fence, and I'll be right, hopefully.
I love Kyle Tucker and Yordan Alvarez. These are 2 of my favorite one-offs because, like you said, Ohtani, we've seen him with power issues. We've also seen him with control issues. when Ohtani starts go poorly, they go very, very poorly. Like there are not usually Ohtani starts where it's like, oh, look, he pitched, 5 innings and gave up 2 runs or something like that. When it goes wayward, Ohtani, it's like he's out after 1 1/3 innings. He can't throw strikes. And Tucker and Alvarez individually are both, well, neither one of them are popular today. Both projected for around 10% ownership. I'm over 20% on both of them. And there's just a lot of home run upside. Yordan Alvarez is maybe one of the top 5 to 8 hitters or so in baseball, just taking offense into account. Only 4,900 on DK. I think he's way, way underowned at just 10%. So I like Yordan Alvarez quite a bit as a one-off. Let's move to the final game of the entire slate. Also, my favorite team to stack, the San Diego Padres. We saved the best for last, going up against Madison Bumgarner. Madison Bumgarner, he lives up to the name at this point in his career. He got into a motorcycle accident a couple years ago. His velocity has diminished ever since. He bounced back a little bit last year, but it was because there was only one way for him to go. In 2020, he had a 6.48 ERA and a 7.79 expected ERA. So, last year, 4.67 ERA, 4.36 expected ERA, better than what he got the year before, but still not all that great. Considering the diminished velocity we've seen from Bumgarner at this point in his career, I don't think it's getting better. And I really like stacking against him. The Padres is the offense I have the most exposure to. And I believe you're on the same page.
Yeah, highest everything, highest exposure, and as aggregate wise, the highest ratings in all of my home run projection models. Manny Machado being at the top of the entire slate for me in terms of most likely to hit a homer.
Yep, I could. Oh, he's number 1 for you
in my bomb detector. It's
okay.
I have Machado, Luke Voit, Will Myers. They're all 1, 2, 3 respectively based on a 2-year sample in my model. And Machado has the highest grade.
Let's see. Which players am I getting the most? Yeah, by the way, I'm getting a lot of exposure to all of those guys. I mean, the field is as well. Mm-hmm. Machado's super popular. Voit, Myers. So current ownership projections, Cronenworth projected for 25%, Machado 30%, Myers 22%, Voit 20%. Austin Nola also 20%. Are these numbers that you're overweight to the field, underweight, or around even with?
I'm over, unfortunately. I don't like to be dramatically over in baseball, but in this case I am.
I think I'm not, I assume that most of this isn't stacking and mine are. So I'm probably going to be overweight to stacks of the Padres, but underweight to the individual hitters if that follows. But I love stacking this team against Madison Bumgarner, who I just think is at the tail end of his career. Let's talk about the final situation on the slate, and an important one. Yu Darvish, who I think is one of the top pitching options, going up against one of the weaker offenses in baseball in the Arizona Diamondbacks. Considering how weak the pitching options are overall on this slate, I really like Darvish. I have him only slightly behind Shane Bieber, but there's also a big ownership gap between Bieber and Darvish. So I'm overweight to Darvish right now. Someone I'm going to be rooting for in a pretty big way. Are you also going to be overweight to Darvish, or is he somebody you're not quite as high
on? Right now I have 48%.
Okay. So you have a lot of them as well.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Based on what you said before, I thought you weren't all that high on Bieber. On Darvish.
Yeah, I didn't expect to be. And this, I'm still fine tuning. We're about to get an upload lock, but I have the most Shane Bieber, and then right below Darvish, I have a little bit. I have Molly. I'm thinking I'm gonna jump Molly in the ownerships there and go backwards on Darvish a little bit, but I'll probably get it down to 30.
I've got bad news. Corbin Burns just gave up a home run to Nico Homer. So he's falling apart here. The 9-hitter, just as it looked like Burns was putting it back together, he has a rocky 5th inning, gives up a single to Seiya Suzuki, a single to Jason Hayward, sack fly to Patrick Wisdom, homer to Nico Homer. So that looks like that is going to be the end of Corbin Burns' opening day. Not the best, not the result we had hoped for.
It's not what you want.
No. R.I.P. Corbin Burns, as Chad is saying. Just for contrarian purposes, are you looking to stack against Yu Darvish at all? Our tools indicate that is not the best course of action today.
No, I wasn't, and there's really not even like a chip in a chair bat. I'm having a lot of Dalton, or I had a lot of Dalton Varsho because I had him projected as a potential leadoff or a leadoff guy. I'm looking at different lineups right now, but it was just a circumstance thing because opportunity calls for a catcher. But this lineup looks pretty bad. It's not necessarily like a big strikeout lineup, but there's like no power in it. So no, I don't really want a powerless stack.
We have actually had an update to some of the tools. So they do look appropriately owned now, 7% chance to be the top stack, 7% ownership. They were negatively leveraged earlier. So that has changed a little bit. Still not a team that I'm really dying to get to. The key to me today is going to be playing the San Diego Padres. So that takes us through all the games on the slate. Do you have anything else that you want to bring up to the audience before we head out here, Gundacker?
I'll say some Ketel Marte did bleed through. But other than that, it seemed like this was a lot of cool, wet games. But the one that wasn't was the Angels game. So just an extra feather in the cap of maybe the Astros stack getting there and your Angel stack.
Yeah, and we've got people in the chat saying that the Diamondbacks kill Yu Darvish when they're at home. Maybe in the past, but Yu Darvish is a different pitcher this year. The Diamondbacks have a different, like, this is a really bad Diamondbacks offense.
Yeah, it is. There was a couple, like, and this is all nuanced stuff. Like when Darvish implodes, he implodes. And I thought Victor Caratini was his caddy and they traded him away. So maybe there's some chemistry, but this team looks awful. So I'm just going to bet on talent versus not talent.
Yeah, and, could Darvish be worse this season? Sure. But I would warn people at looking at, data from just last year, individual matchups, because it might not be all that telling, especially when you look at some of Darvish's numbers. He was fairly unlucky last year. He had a 4.22 ERA, his highest mark in a little while, but he had a 3.35 expected ERA. So I think there's a lot of reason to think he should bounce back, even though he is older. He still has really good stuff. I'm not too concerned about it right now. If he starts the year with like velocity down or stuff like that, then I'll have to reconsider a little bit. For now, though, I'm still feeling pretty good about Darvish coming into the year, especially against one of the worst offenses in baseball. Guys, thank you very much for watching. We've got the baseball season underway. Some of the games are starting. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I hope you guys keep checking out our shows this year because we're going to be coming with a lot of them because baseball season starting, basketball winding down. Catch you guys later.